Lion of Judah Society.
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. And when they were come in, 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 they went up into an upper room. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
Lion of Judah Society.
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
Lion of Judah shall break every chain. He is the conqueror. Now we sing a song of redemption and love. Song of liberty. Remove the chains of Babylon. He said, I'm free out of living in poverty, out of captivity.
Lion of Judah Society.
Lion of Judah shall break every chain. He is the conqueror. Now we sing a song of redemption and love. Song of liberty. Sitting on the mountain so peaceful and high. By reality, leading the children to do right. Reveal the prophecy. Show I the way to Mount Zion. He said, I'm free out of living in poverty, out of captivity. Lion of Judah shall break every chain.
Lion of Judah Society.
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
Yes. Erev Tov. Good evening. Welcome here to the podcast, LOJ Podcast, Upper Room of Zion here. Thursday podcast, 5th day of the Shavua. The 5th day. Wow. Reaching the 5th day of this new Shavua. Pesach, coming forward. Yes, Shalom, Chaverim, Yeshua Shalom. Keeping ones and I prayers to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Hashem, Yeshua HaMoshiach. Let's comfort one another, strengthen one another, chazak. To the fellow disciples, be strong, we need chazek. Make we strengthen one another, make we encourage one another. May you also comfort one another that are going through trials and tribulation and mourning, especially in this time and this season. Yes, so here we begin the third book of the Torah, third book of the scripture, third book of the Bible. Here at Leviticus, going to pick up more with Leviticus. We have the 5th day's Aliyah, and perhaps touch on the 6 days Aliyah, but also to kind of break down and build more on the central theme here. The theme, what's the theme here in this third book? Well, the tabernacle, right? The tabernacle. Pay attention to the pattern recognition. The tabernacle has been built, right? Has been set up, the tent pitch put together. The cloud has descended above the tabernacle, and the glory, the kabod, Yahweh, the glory of Jehovah has filled it. But Moses cannot enter. Kind of interesting because Moses was able to go up to the mount, enter into the cloud on the mount, and to be in the presence. The presence of Yahweh Eloheinu, speak to Elohim, as the scripture says, as a man speaketh to his friend. Panim el panim in the Hebrew, panim el panim. The general translation is face to face, face to face. But right here, we have today's daily psalm. Just to note this for the record, we have Psalm 78. 78 that speaks to Yisrael's history. So here we get a kind of an overview. And also the theme of the tabernacle is very, very much a key. What did Yahweh choose? Who did Yahweh choose? And also the reasons why he chose, what he chose. But first things first, right here, the evening psalm here, the standing psalm, the evening psalm here for the 5th day, the evening of the 5th day. So here we call this Thursday, according to the Gentiles, but here the 5th day. Psalm 81, standing psalm right here, the evening psalm. Shema Yisrael. Let's rise up to chant. Psalm 81. Alexander Scorby on the read from the KJV with some of the Hebrew, the Ivrit, the Hebrew highlights. Shema Yisrael. Hear this.
Psalm 81.
מזמור פא למנצח על הגיתית לאסף, 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 לאסף.
Sing aloud unto God our strength, our strength.
עוזנו, 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 עוזנו. הרנינו לאלוהים עוזנו, עוזנו, עוזנו.
Make a joyful noise unto the God of Jacob, God of Jacob, God of Jacob.
לאלוהי יעקב, לאלוהי יעקב, לאלוהי יעקב. הריעו לאלוהי יעקב, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי יעקב.
Take a psalm, and bring hither the timbrel, the pleasant harp with the psaltery. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. For this was a statute for Israel, and a law of the God of Jacob. This he ordained in Joseph for a testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not. I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were delivered from the pots. Thou calledst in trouble, and I delivered thee. I answered thee in the secret place of thunder. I proved thee at the waters of Meribah. Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will testify unto thee. O Israel, if thou wilt hearken unto me. There shall no strange God be in thee, neither shalt thou worship any strange God. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Open thy mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people would not hearken to my voice, and Israel would none of me. So I gave them up unto their own heart's lust, and they walked in their own counsels. Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and Israel had walked in my ways. I should soon have subdued their enemies, and turned my hand against their adversaries. The haters of the Lord should have submitted themselves unto him. But their time should have endured forever. He should have fed them also with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied, 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 I have satisfied.
So here, Psalm 81. Mizmor Pei Aleph, Mizmor Fei Aleph, according to the Hebrew Aleph numerics. The Hebrew letter Peh or Fe, Peh, has numerical value of 80. And Aleph, first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Mizmor, psalm, chant, Mizmor, Fe, Aleph, Peh, Aleph. Psalm 81, Psalm LXXXI. Here is themed the festival. We have a festival a festival meditation. Now, according to the Judaic tribe, right, even for we, the black Jews of the line of the tribe of Judah, here we connect the psalm, Mizmor Fe Aleph, with the harvest festival, with tabernacles, usually in the 7th month of the year. Now, this is a view that is accepted by many, many, many. Now, there's others that look at today's, well, the evening psalm here, Psalm 81, the standing psalm, here for the 5th day of the Shavua, the 5th day of the week. Others prefer to associate today's evening psalm, the evening psalm 81, with the Pesach. So here in the season, we have Pesach, Passover, coming forward on the Gregorian calendar. That would mark it for the evening time, the beginning for the evening time of what's called April 12th, right? So others associate the evening psalm, Psalm 81, a festival meditation, with Pesach, in the Hebrew Pesach, in the Royal Amharic Fasika, Pesach, Fasika, Pesach, right? Passover, because of the mention of the Exodus. The Exodus is mentioned in the evening psalm here in verse 5 in the King James Version, verse 5, KJV version, and verse 6 in the Hebrew. Now, as we mentioned before, there's often a numbering difference because in the King James Version, the superscription, or what's called the title, often is not numbered. But in the Hebrew manuscripts, we get a numbering of the superscription that reads, "To the chief musician, upon Gittith, a psalm of Asaph." So in verse 5 KJV, it says, he appointed it in Joseph for a testimony when he went forth. Mine, KJV, I think, says through the land. Let's just bring this up right here. Through the land. I'm just going to briefly touch on the evening psalm right here. And then we're going to segue as we move forward here on the podcast to today's daily psalm, according to the Royal Order of the Ethiopian Hebrews. Here after the Order of Melchizedek, we have Psalm 78. Now, Psalm 78, this is a psalm of about Hebraically 72 verses right here, right? Would love to really go through one of these bigger psalms, take the full podcast. But here, Psalm 78, right? Psalm 78, just touching on it, keep Psalm 81 on the screen right here. But in Psalm 78, right, Mizmor Ein Chet, right? Psalm 78, we have the lesson of Yisrael, of the Beta Israel's history, right? Lesson of the Beta Israel's history. But here, the evening psalm, let's bring this up on the screen right here, right? Let's bring this up right here. Psalm 81. We're going to bring up the KJV just to compare the difference in translation, because some things do get lost in translation. So here we go right here. We got it, right? So there we have from the My Sword software, with the blue letter. When we say blue letter, because it's blue letter, the hyperlinks, but the H words, so we can compare the Hebrew and the KJV and the Hebrew Judaic translation that we have in a hard copy before us. So we have a festival meditation, evening psalm right here, festival meditation. Some connect this psalm, right, with the harvest festival, with tabernacles that occurs in the 7th month of the year. So basically, we have a new year right here. We're in a new year, Shana L'Shana Tova, right? We're in the holy, the ecclesiastical, or the churchical year, the holy year, right? According to HaTorah, right? The month that's known as Abib, right? Abib, according to the scripture, right? And after the Babylonian captivity, it was referred to as Nisan, Nisan. So we have Nisan and we have Abib. Hold on for a moment. Let's see if I could bring this up right here. All right, going through the months and the moons right here. Give me one moment right here. See if I can find the exhibit. You know, a kind of little site sample exhibit, and give thanks to these ones and ones that put this together. It's a very good put together. You know, it's a good teachable, for a teachable moment. So we're scrolling to the slides, I'm going to slide on this, right? The slides of the song. I mean, the slides of the months. Hold on for a moment. Really have to sort, have to sort these pictures, sort these exhibits. There's a lot of good information out there. And I definitely will say to ones and ones, if you come across some good information out there, if you can, find a way to download it, save it, or if there's ones and ones in your circle that know how to download, because, um, mm, it's predicted, and we already kind of vibed that the time would come, where they're seeking to kind of like scrub, the scrubbing of the internet. We talk about Daniel's prophecy, right? In Daniel's prophecy, it talks about they shall go to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Now, we interpret this as prophetic concerning the internet, even in a sense concerning social media. Okay, here we go. We got it, right? Concerning social media. If you know anything about the technology, right, the technology basically aligns with the prophecy when it says go, right? Go, progress, proceed. Like if you send a text or something like that, it goes forward, right? Right? They shall go to and fro, right? So the operation of the system is binary. It has to be yes or no, black or white, 0 or 1. You know what I mean? 0 or 1, yes or no, the whole binary system. So that the process is modulation. They call it technically modulation and demodulation. Right? That's another way of explaining what we have in the scriptures in Daniel's prophecy about they shall go to and fro. Now, of course, one can say, well, it's people moving over here and over there, going to and fro. And yes, it is people. People move here and there. They take pictures, videos, post information, share information from here and from there. And as the scripture says, knowledge shall increase, right? Knowledge shall increase, right? So here, where this is where we're at right here as far as the month. This is what we wanted to show right here, right? Forgot, I think it's a sister that does this right here. But here, sister, speaking of sister of faith, right? So here we have Nisan, right? Nisan, the first month, Nisan, right? The first month, right? When we calculate what we call the holy year. Now, is it 2 years? Is it 2 years? Right? Is every year, in a sense, twofold? Oh, yes, every year is twofold according to the scripture. Right. So often at the seventh month, the seventh moon, roughly September, October time, roughly like that. Sometimes if it's a leap year, it might be a little bit later. It depends on the lunar solar calculation. We get what is called Rosh Hashanah. Rosh, the head, Hashanah. Now that's the head of the year, but that's a civil year. So the civil year usually begins, at the seventh, right? Or more fully after the seventh month, the seventh moon, the seventh month. Right? Now people say, no, they can't be 2 years. But it says in the seventh month, right? It does say in the scripture, in the seventh month, it says at the end of the year, right? At the end of the year. So let's make this a little teachable moment right here at the end of the year. Now, I think we still have the window over here, right? We can actually scroll back to that, right? Slide back to that right here. Let's just put in here end, right, of the, let's put end and year. Let's just put end and year, right? Of the year. But let's put end in the year. All right, let's scroll down here. Let's scroll down here. It says when the year was ended. This is Genesis. And it came to pass in the end of the 400. Okay, yeah. And the end of the, okay, here we go right here. Here we go. Exodus, movement of Yah people, of Yahweh's people. So here we have Exodus 23:16. It says, and the feast of harvest, right? The first fruits of thy labors. Now, feast of harvest, right? And tabernacles of Sukkot, it occurs in the seventh month, right? and the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors that thou hast sown in the field, and the feast of ingathering, right? The ingathering, Asif, right? So in the seventh month, we have the seventh month is often called Tabernacles, but Tabernacles is a harvest festival, and it occurs in the seventh month. The seventh month, vis-a-vis where we're at right here, Hebraically, right? Hebraically, according to the Torah, we're at the first month, right? The first month that's called Abib in the Torah, and after the Babylonian captivity, right? The adoption of the secondary name that's used sometimes as the first name, Nisan, right? So here, over here, Nisan Abib is the first month, the first moon, right? The month of redemption, the month of the Exodus. And it's been assigned to the tribe of Judah, not because of the so-called astrological significance. We got to make that mention. And hail up to 12 tribes, of Israel. You know what I'm saying? The 12 tribes of Israel overall, and even Rastafari wise, the 12 tribes of Israel. You know what I mean? Just to hail them up. That's a good name. Good name. Some of the doctrines, well, need some questioning. Are we Israelite because we're born in a certain astrological month? That's a whole reasoning right there, right? But to the constellation in this time, it's the constellation of the Ram, right? We're actually in the time of the constellation of the Ram. Let's see if we can bring that up right there, right? See the Ram right there, right? The Ram, or what's called in the zodiac, right? AKA the zodiac, according to the Greek, right? Zodiac circle of animals. It's called the Ram. Now, many of these associations go back to many nations, and Israel is not accepted, or not out of the equation with this. But this is a time where we celebrate the Passover lamb, right? The Passover lamb. See, the ram, what's the ram? The ram is a male lamb, right? Isn't the ram a male lamb? And they call it, according to constellation Aries, celebrate the Passover lamb as heaven and earth connect, right? And here assigned in the Brit Chadasha is the book of Yohanan, right? Book of Yohanan, the Besorah HaKadosha Al Pi Yohanan. What's in the Hebrew, that would be the gospel according to John, or Al Pi, on the mouth of Al Pi Yohanan, on the mouth of Yohanan, right? On the witness, the testimony. So what do we have here? This month is assigned, right, to Yehuda, right, to Judah. Now one may ask, well, how is the month assigned to Judah? That's a good question, right? Remember the Chodesh HaYehuda, first month, Abib, right, being known as the Chodesh HaYehuda. Remember that Judah was the fourth born, right? But in the order of things, he comes to the headship, right? He comes to the headship, Judah, right? Now Yehuda, right, refers to praise, right? Literally, Judah, Yehuda, is like praised. We're speaking of the son, that fourth son, right, of Leah, that fourth son of the patriarch Jacob, right? When he was named Yehuda because he was named to be the praised one, the celebrated one. Judah, you are he whom your brethren shall praise, right? The month of thanking, right? Of thanking Elohim, thanking God for deliverance. The characteristic of this month, this moon, is repentance, redemption, as well as the beginning of miracles, The first of months, right? The first of months according to Torah. I don't know if you can see this here. Let's zoom in a little bit, right? The first of months of the Hebrew year. And this is the Pesach, Passover, the Fasika month, right? The Fasika moon. Now, let's go over here, right? So the seventh month, right? Here we got the seventh month, the seventh moon, right? Let me do one more thing. Right here. Give me one moment, right? So that this can be a little more, because that's an exhibit I have right there. Then I got all of them, right? Let's see right here. I got all of them right here. Give me one moment right here. Right, so here we go. All right, so the Hebraic months. Let's zoom in. The Hebraic months. Right, we have Abib, Nisan, Abib, Iyar, Siwan, Tammuz, Av, right? We have Elul, we have Tishri. Okay, this is the prophetic art of James, what's his name right there? Nesbitt. Give thanks, James Nesbitt. Right? We have Cheshwan or Cheshvan, Kislev, right? Tevet, Shevet, and Adar, right? Right? So let's go over here so you can see this like this. This might be a better way of explaining it and showing it. Okay, so you see right there? Before exile, let's see if we can make this a little larger. Okay, but there we go. That's good. Before exile, right? Before exile and after exile. Before the exile, especially of the tribe of Judah, right? Yehuda, the southern kingdom, right? Abib, right? We have Abib, the first month as written in Torah, right? And after exile, we have Nisan. Before exile, the second month is Zil. Zil, actually in the ancient time would be Zil. Modern Hebrew they call it Ziv, right? But Zil, right? Or in modern time Ziv, right? Ziv, right? Now after exile is called Er, right? And then over here as we get to the third Yerach, Yerach, name for month, like literally like a moon, literally, right? So then we have third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So in the Torah, after the second month, the third month is just the third month, right? The third Chodesh, Yareach, right? Citing of the sign in the heavens. The fourth, that faithful witness in the heavens. The moon is called the Yareach, that faithful witness. Fourth month, fifth month, sixth month. And then when we get to the seventh month in Torah does have a name, right? Does have a name, right? And the name is Etanim, right? Etanim. We find it in the scripts, right? And that corresponds to the month of Tishri, the seventh month, Tishri, right? Or Tishri, right? Tishri. Eighth month is known as Bul, right, in the Torah. And after the Babylonian captivity, as Mar Cheshwan, right? Mar Cheshwan, or in modern Hebrew, some would say it as Mar Cheshvan, right? The ninth month is just known as the ninth month before exile, the 10th month, the 11th month, and the 12th month. But this corresponds to Kislev, right? Tebet, Shebet, and Adar. Or other Yehudi would say, enunciate as Kislev, right? Kislev, Tevet, Shevet, and Adar. Right there. Now, just to show that right there, and then also the correspondence with, usually the Hebrew month, the lunar solar month, it kind of cuts across the two Gregorian months, like March, April, right? Sometime between March and April, right? First month, second month, Ziv, right? Or Ziv, right? April, May, right? Then we go on until we get to the seventh month, as we mentioned, September, October, right? September, October. That's the seventh month. Just needed to go here, right? Just to go here for a moment. Give me one moment at the screen. Right. So here it says in Exodus 23 and 16, we already had read this in the previous, semester, right? Like we look at the 5 books to be like individual semesters in a sense, like individual studies, right? But here, the feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors, which thou hast sown in the field, the feast of ingathering, the ingathering of the crops, Asif, right? What it says, that is in the what? The end of the year, the end of the Shana. Now, if you know the context of this here in Exodus 23 and 16, you have to ask the question, say, wait, hold on for a moment. That's the seventh month, right? These feasts occur in the seventh month, right? And here it says at the end of the year, right? Yatzah, the exiting, right? Of the what? The exiting of the Shana, right? The Shana, the year. Speaking of division of time, measurement of time, so forth and so on. The Shana, the revolution of time, right? When it says, thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field, right? Out of the field. Now notice over here in Exodus 34 and 22, what does it say? And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks. That's what is called Pentecost, right? That's in the middle, roughly, of the first 7 months, 7 moons, right? Of the first fruits of wheat harvest. That's the Pentecost day, 50th day after, right? The first fruits, right? The first fruit, first day or Sunday, right? We say Sunday because of Martin, the Martin thing, because the first fruits during the Passover is on the morrow after the Shabbat. And we count the morrow after the Shabbat, the seventh day Shabbat. So when we go into Passover, right, and we go through the Passover time, the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat in that time, right, on the next day after that, which would be the first day that they call Sunday, will be the offering of the first fruits, right? The first fruits, right? The first of like the wheat harvest that has been growing up, right? The first fruits. And then from that day, we count 7 Shabbats complete, right? The 7 Shabbats complete. Weekly Sabbath, 7th day of the Shavua, until we get to the 7th Shabbat, 49 days, 7 times 7, 2 sevens, multiplied, 49, right? And then on the morrow after, right, the 7th Shabbat, in other words, 49 days later, on the next day after the Shabbat. So what's the next day after the Shabbat? The next day after the Shabbat would be the first day of the Shavua. But what do they call, right, the morrow after the Sabbath? What do they call that? They call that Sunday. So that proves that, what some of the Israelites, Hebrew Israelites and others have said, many others overzealous, but not having the knowledge. They say, well, there's no, there's no feast or worship or any kind of holy thing that occurs on the first day of the week. Well, to their credit, many of them say that, well, we don't have anything that occurs on Sunday. There's no worship, whatever, on Sunday. Well, technically, no, it's not Sunday because the Hebrews never used the term Sunday, right, in that way for the first day. But what we've proven here is that there is, according to Torah, a first day observation, right, on the morrow after the Sabbath. Remember, we offer the first fruits during the Passover season. So we have Passover, right? And then we have the 7 days of unleavened bread. And then in the midst of the 7 days of unleavened bread, right, we have the morrow after, right, the Shabbat, right? The morrow after the Shabbat. Remember when Yeshua said, right, about the 3 days, right? And, the 3 days and 3 nights, and compared, right, to Jonah. Now, another falsity among Christianity is the Good Friday thing. It sounds nice. It sounds beautiful. I love it. Good Friday, Good Friday, good Saturday, good Monday, good Tuesday, good Wednesday, good Thursday, Good Friday. You know what I mean? But it wasn't Friday. The day of the crucifixion wasn't Friday, right? It wasn't the 6th day of the Shavua, right? It occurred in the midst of the week, which is known as the Wednesday, right? That's when, as Daniel's prophecy said that Messiah will be cut off in the midst of the week. So we have the middle of the week, the Wednesday, right? And then as it came to evening on that 4th day of the Shavua, as it came to evening time in the Passover beginning, right? The Passover beginning, by that time they slew the lambs, when the lamb, right, said it is finished, right? They slew the lamb on the same day, right? The lambs for Passover. So when the evening time comes in, the scripture tells us that Joseph of Arimathea, one of the good Pharisees, right? One of the Pharisees that believed that Yeshua of Nazareth, HaNotri, was indeed HaMoshiach, was indeed the expected Messiah, the Messiah, son of the woman, the Messiah of the parables, as the book of Enoch even predicts the first and the second advent, right? In his first advent, Messiah would be son of the woman, because the first prophecy in scripture speaks about the seed of the woman. Let's see, reconcile that, right? The seed of the woman, right? This also speaks, right, to that unique, incarnation, that unique conception, right, of Moshiach, right? Be that as it may, right there, you know what I mean? let's get back to this right here because we're trying to connect the dots. So from Thursday, as it goes into Thursday, right, the fifth day, right? So that means that Moshiach, by time it comes to the fourth day, the evening time, as the sun was going down, Joseph of Arimathea, he got a habeas corpus, habeas corpus that we know as habeas corpus. That's a Latin phrase. A Latin phrase that means give the body, like give me the body, right? He basically requested the body of Yeshua, right? Because even Torah says that even if it was a convicted, guilty one that was hung on a tree, right, that they would not hang all night, you know what I mean? And especially since it was the holy time of Passover, right? The season, the reason for the season, right, of the crucifixion of Yeshua, HaNotzri, on the tree of his cross, right, was, you know what I mean, the Passover time. So we have Passover coming in the evening, right? And the next day would be the first day of unleavened bread. So let's count for a moment. If it is Wednesday, the middle of the week, the fourth day of the Hebrew week, right? The middle of the week. Then from Thursday, right? Day and night. Friday, day and night in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, right? Right. And Friday, day and night, and Saturday, day and night. And this is why the scripture says that when the Marys and Mariam Magdalawit, you know, they went forward, they had preparations to, you know, prepare the body, you know, with the oil and the other processes, you know, to prepare the body for death and everything like that. They could not find the body, but the scripture clearly tells us, you know, what day it was that they went, you know, to the, you know, to the grave, you know, to the tomb rather, right, to find him, and he was not there, right? So that proves right there the 3 days and 3 nights, right? Crucifixion in the middle of the week, right, that we call Wednesday, the fourth day, right? By the fifth day, sixth day, and seventh day, day and night, Yeshua, right, his body, right, was in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And then scripture records that Mary and the Marys, and you know what I mean, but especially Mariam Magdalawit, you know, finding him, right? Well, first he found her, right? He was dressed as a gardener. She did not recognize him, right? Until he called her name, right? And then she recognized, right? So clearly he is resurrected on that first day, right? You know, that first day. Now, that same first day of the Shavuot, right, that the Gentiles call Sunday, but the first day, the morrow after the Shabbat, corresponded to the day, right, Hebraically according to the Torah, of the first fruits, right, of the presentation, right, in the tabernacle, in the temple of the first fruits. And lo and behold, Moshiach risen. Lo and behold, 3 days and 3 nights, right? So the Wednesday, crucifixion day, right? You know, Wednesday from 9 to 3, right? Basically from 9 to 3, the darkness happening around noon, right? Along with, you know, the earthquake and all of that. And here's what's interesting: as we study it, we can even narrow it down to the very year, right? Because many of the signs that were shown at that time, right, are recorded. And here's a beautiful thing about the heavens. You know, the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, it's like a clock. Imagine you look at a clock. You have the small hand, the big hand. You have the minute, the hour hands. You know, you have, you know, the points on the clock. That's what the sun, the moon, and the stars are, right? They're not gods, so to speak, or deities, right? Or like sentient beings, but they are very obedient beings because the heavens move in a clockwork. You know, the heavens move in a clockwork. So the amazing thing that one will find is that understanding that it is possible, right, to go back in time, understanding the heavens, right, to see the relative position, right, on the clock, right? But be that as it may, right there, that was a little segue right there. Exodus chapter 34, verse 22 also says, because this is just to prove that the end of the year, when it mentions year's end, the end of the year, it corresponds with the 7th month. But if it's not the end of the year, right, what year is it the end of? Well, it's the end of the ecclesiastical, the Hebrew churchical year, from Abib, the first month, to the seventh month. So the 7 appointments, feasts, and festivals that occur in 3 seasons. So there's 7 feasts and festivals, and to get a full, Leviticus chapter 23. For ones and ones that want to get a full in one chapter, Leviticus chapter 23, right? It mentions, we can say, the 8 holidays, right? But 7 of them might occur in the first 7 moons. What are the 8 holidays mentioned, or holy days, set apart day? Well, firstly is Shabbat. Shabbat is the holy day or the holiday, right? In season and out of season. You've heard that before, right? In season and out of season. Well, what does in season and out of season mean? Well, here we have entered into the season, into the holy season, with Pesach coming up. And we'll remain in season until we fulfill, right, the feasts and the festivals in the 7th month, the 7th moon, right? And then after the 7th month and the 7th moon, then we will be out of season, right? We will be out of the holy season. The only feast, or rather festival or holy day we still have, is the weekly Shabbat. So the Shabbat both occurs, right? The Shabbat both occurs. Okay, that was a good meme right there. Can you bring back that meme, that last meme, the one that has the yellow against the black background, if you can, right? If you could bring back that one right there. I'm looking, I'm observing the monitor. Yeah, that one right there, right? Because this is important right here. Okay, the shofar announces a new month, right? Here in Psalm 81, verses 3 to 4, this evening psalm here, standing psalm, evening psalm, Psalm 81, right? Here it says, sound the shofar, right, at the Rosh Chodesh, right? Now, Rosh Chodesh, the other scriptural name for Rosh Chodesh is the Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah. Teruah mean like a blast, a shout, or trumpet. The day, Yom, day, right, of Teruah, the day of the blast of the shofar. The shofar is the ram's horn, right? Then it says, and at full moon, the full moon for the pilgrim festival, the pilgrim feast. What's the pilgrim feast? The pilgrim feast is, wait for it, is Sukkot, is tabernacles. When does tabernacles occur in the month? Right? Well, tabernacle occurs, right, on the 15th of the month. Now remember, it's a lunar solar month, right? So when is the moon full? When's the moon full? Right? It's full roughly around its 14th, 15th day, right? Because the moon generally has 28, but some calculate 28 to 29, right, days. A solar month has 30 days, and a lunar month has approximately 28 plus days. So there where it says at the full moon, right, for the pilgrim festival or pilgrim feast, that is speaking of tabernacles. Now, we could go through this in the scripts, but once again, Leviticus chapter 23 points it out, as well as elsewhere in Exodus, but chapter 23 is a good chapter to go to right there. Well, let me just give you the 7th month, the 7th moon right here. So the 7th month, the 7th moon, how does it go? In the 7th month, when the 7th month begins, right, on the first day of the month, right, is called the Day of Trumpets, right? And what do we mean by the trumpets? Really, the day of the shofar, literally, the ram's horn. Well, it sounds a little something like this. So Tishri is the later name of that month. Tishri is the 7th month, Tishri, right? Be fruitful and multiply, right, is assigned to the tribe of Ephraim, right? The month of the strong, right? Tishri is the month of the what's called the fall festivals. Fall festivals, by the time we get to September, October, that's what they call the fall time of the year, the autumnal time, when we are to return to Elohim and to experience kabodo, his kabod, glory. In modern Hebrew, they will say kavodo, his kabod, his glory, his gravity. So Tishri is a month of Yahweh's appointed times. What occurs there? Let's see if we can zoom in so you can see this fully right here. What occurs there, right there? What occurs there is the Feast of Trumpets, right? The atonement, right? Atonements, actually, and tabernacles, right? So we have Yom Teruah, the day of the trumpet. So Yom Teruah, right? After the Babylonian captivity and after that time became known as Rosh Hashanah. Rosh, the head of Hashanah, the head of the year. Why do they call it the head of the year? Right? Well, they call it the head of the year because studying Torah, you find right here in Exodus 23 and 16, the feast of harvest, right? The latter harvest. So in the seventh month, September, October is the latter harvest. So there are the first rains that occur at this time and season, and then there's the latter rains, the first and the latter rains, right? The feast of harvest, the first fruits of thy labors that thou hast sown in the field, the feast of ingathering, another name, right, for the tabernacle season. So in the holy way, we tabernacle because Yahweh said so. But then the agricultural way, we gather in our crops because we know it's the season is changing right here, right? And we're about to go into the darker months, the darker moons for about 5 months until we come around again, right, to Abib, to the first of months of March, April time. Check. So here it says, in gathering, in the end of the year, right? When the year goes out, and to say in the Hebrew, when thou hast gathered in thy labors out of the field, because it's the September, October time in the land, right? Between the two rivers, between the river Ethiopia, river Egypt, and the river Euphrates in that region of the world, right? Is that time that the season begins to change, right? So in Exodus 34 and 22, it says, thou shalt observe the feast of weeks. So now here it points to the fourth of the 7 appointments that's known as Pentecost, right? In later times, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, right? And the feast of ingathering. So it's connecting 2 feasts. So the feast of weeks, right? The feast of weeks is known as Shabuot. Shabuot, right? Because remember, from the first fruits during Passover time, in the beginning, right, of the holy year, right, from first fruits, right, on that first day of the Shabuah, on the morrow, the next day after the Shabbat, right, is when we offer the first fruits, right? And then the Torah teaches us that we are to count 7 Shabbats until we come to the Feast of Weeks or the Feast of Shabuot. So when we say Shabuah, Shabuah is a week. We say Shabuah Tov. When we say Shabuot, it's to say weeks. So Shabuah is a singular week, and Shabuot is weeks. This is why it's called the Feast of Weeks, right? Because we count 7 Shabbats. The Shabbat is the 7th day of the Shabuah, of the week, right? So 7 times 7 is 49. And then the Torah says on the morrow, the next day after. So the day after the Shabbat is the first day of the week that the Gentiles call Sunday, right? And that is the Feast of Weeks, is also of the first fruits of the wheat, right? The wheat harvest. Now, another interesting thing is Abib. When we talk about the month of Abib, the first month, according to Torah, Abib, right? Abeba, right? Abib, as in Tel Aviv or Tel Aviv, right? Abib. Abib means barley. It's barley. So Abib is literally the barley, right? So the month of barley, right? This is also how we are able to calculate time, right? The month of barley, right? Abib. This was the month of the Exodus, the growing of the barley. So barley grows quicker, right, than the wheat. The wheat will take at least those 7 weeks to come to maturity, right? And this is the time of the counting of the Omer, the counting of the growth of the crops, right? And then it connects here, and. You see the word conjunction word and, right? So there's the fourth, right? And then it moves us to the end of the year and the feast of ingathering at year's end. Now, the word year's end is interesting. Tikufa. So the tikufa, right? So over here, the word for end was yatsa, the root word, yatsa, not the form found in the verse, but the main root word, right? When looking up in the dictionary, yatsa. Yatsa means to exit, Yatsa, like to go out, right? So the ingathering at the year's end, right? And the year is the part of the year from the first month, March, April, approximately, to September, October, right? When thou hast gathered in thy labors. But over here it says, and the feast of ingathering, but notice it's pointing to the same feast of Asif. Asif from Asaf. Asaf means to gather. Asif, gathering in of crops. Why are we gathering in of crops? Because the year is about to change. It's about to get colder, right? It's about to get less sun, right? The sun cycle is changing. Now, here's what's interesting about year's end right here. Now, so both of these year's end is speaking about the same thing, but it's using slightly different word, right? Because in the context, it's pointing to what is happening, right, at this time of the year, roughly the September, October, or in the leap year, it could push into November, right? At the year's end, right? At the year's end, the tikufa. Tikufa. What is tikufa? Tikufa is the coming round. It's a circuit of time, right? A space of time, a turning, a circuit. Tikufa, a circuit like the heavens, as the heavens circuit around the earthly plane. A revolution of time that is of the sun. So specifically, the tikufata hashana. The tikufat hashana in the verse is the end of the sun cycle. Now you notice when we come to September, October, something changes with the sun cycle. The sun cycle begins to change, right? It's like it goes on a different track, right? And then the winter, the colder time comes in, right? In fact, the longer nights, right? As opposed to longer days, longer nights and shorter days and less sun time, right? So this is what it's speaking about in the year, right? So it's very clear that technically there are 2 years in the Hebrew year, right? There's a year vis-a-vis the holy feasts and festivals, as well as the agricultural, right, and food security matters. Because, we talk about agriculture, that's food security. So look how Yahweh look out for we, and look out for the covenant people, right? He's speaking about these feasts and festivals and how they're connected with food security, right? And so we come to the end of the year, the end of the holy year, the churchical year, the year from the first month to the 7th month, right? At this particular point right here. That means after this, there's no feast, as we say, no feast, no festival, with the exception of the weekly Shabbat. There's no feast or festival that is appointed, right, to covenant keeping wise. Remember, all these feasts and festivals are part of the covenant, right? Of the covenant people, of the Bnei Yisrael, right? So here is the Tikufat Hashana. Now, here they bring it out year's end from the Hebrew, the revolution of the year. So at the 7th month, right, the 7th moon, we come to a revolution of the year. Now, noticing it on the ground, this definitely is a change. Doesn't it change from like summertime, and autumn to winter? Isn't there a rapid change? I mean, there's like a sudden change. There's really a rapid change. And the main change we notice is concerning the sun, right? The sun cycle, right? Here comes the sun and there goes the sun, right? The sun revolution, the revolution of the sun, right? Cycle, right there. So, wanted to bring that out right here. And then just in case one thing that we already brought out 2 witnesses, it says 2 or 3 witnesses, but let's bring in the 3rd witness. Deuteronomy 11, and 12. So it says a land that Yahweh Loheka cares for, right? So notice how in the script it's speaking about that Yahweh cares for his people, yes, his creatures, his creation, but it also specifies that he cares for her. He cares for her. He cares for the land, right? The eyes of Yahweh Loheka always upon her, right? The it is really her because the land is really her, right? So he who he be, he cares for she. He cares for the land, right? His eyes, the eyes of Yahweh, right? Ainai Elohim are always upon her, right? From the beginning of the year even to the end, right? Now, notice something right here. Here we have the third word for end. This word is acharit, right? Acharit, right? You know, acharita yamim, right? The end of days, right? That's to say the end of days in the Hebrew, but acharit, acharit means the end, the after part, the end, the hindermost, the end, the last, the end, right? So notice these three words that it uses, right? Yatzah, the going out, right? The going out of this season, the going out of the times that are agriculturally suitable times of the year, coming into the winter, the darker months, the darker moons, you know, basically from roughly, you know, after September, October, all the way until we get to March, April, roughly time of the year again, right? And then over here, it says at the end of 3 years. Now, this is a little different. This is concerning the various different kind of tithes. There was more than one type of tithe, and the tithe was of the fruit, of the crop, of the livestock, of the land, right? And even when it says that the tithe, right, because there's a certain tithe that the master of the house, right, the man of the house, the master of the house, right, to whom more is given, more is required, that he puts up for the season where he brings his whole family and the Levite and the stranger and the widow and the orphan with him to Jerusalem, to the holy place. And that tithe that he saves up is not for no priest or pastor. That tithe is for him and his family, right? To eat and to rejoice and to be glad. And that's the only tithe that he may convert into money if the way be too long, right? If the way be too long, he may convert that into money, right? So here it's speaking about one of the tithes, right? At the end of 3 years, right, thou shalt bring the tithes, right? Notice the end here is the katzeh, 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 the end. You see the end in the sense of the extremity. So notice we just touched on about 4 words for end, all connected with the year, right? Are they all saying the same thing? No. At the end, right, of 7 years, what it says here, right here, right, the gates. Now, gates, right, comes from katzeh. Gates come from katzeh or ketzeh, right? Gates is also the end, right? The end, right? Like the end, right? Like the acharit, the end, right? At the end, right, of 7 years. But now the other end of the year that we pointed to was the 7th month and 7th moon, both in Yatzah. That's the going out of the season, the times which are agriculturally suitable, right? And then it uses the other word tikufa, right? Tikufa in the phrase tikufat hashana, right? The end of the revolution of the sun cycle is speaking about how the sun cycle is going to change, right? Therefore, it's not going to be agriculturally suitable, right? Now, the other words for end. So basically, we're trying to break down these like 4 or so words for end into this two, the two relative meanings. This end is end, like when 7 years, right, are ended fully, completely. At the end, right, of 7 years, thou shalt make a release. So this is the sabbatical year. This is the Shemitah year. This is the year of release. So here he used the word kates. One more right here. Right? Let's see if there's any more end right here. Right? The end of tithing. That's a different sense. Notice, even here with the end of tithing, it's not the same end. It's kala. As Yeshua said, kula. Right? It is finished. Right? Right? Kala. Different word for end. That's just speaking about tithing right there. Right? Over here in 31 and 10, Moshe, right, commanded them, and here Moses is commanding a new generation. He's speaking to the children. So those who were brought out in the Exodus, right, he was not pleased with them, and he didn't bring them in, right? He didn't bring them in. Instead, he caused them to wander for 40 years based on Moshe's plea bargain. You know what I mean? You know, his advocacy, right? And now Moses gets an opportunity to speak to the children, right, of the other children of Israel, right, that he brought out, right? And he commanded them, saying at the end, so it's repeating this right here because he's speaking in Deuteronomy, he's speaking to the children, right, of those who had wandered, those that came out of Egypt but did not come into the land, right? At the end, right, of 7 years. So here we have the same word eights, right? In the solemnity of the year of relief. Notice when this occurs. In the Feast of Tabernacles. When does Tabernacles occur? Right? Tabernacles occur right here in this season. Right? That this psalm is speaking to in this verse right here. Right? The shofar is only blown, right, at the Rosh Hodesh, right, of the month, right, of the 7th month, right, the 7th month, where we get the last of the 3 feasts and festivals, right? So first, on the first day of the 7th month, the blowing of the shofar, the trumpets. This is to like warn ones and remind ones to repent, because we have 10 days, 10 days, 10 days of judgment, 10 days, the 10 days of awe. What are these 10 days? You shall be tried 10 days. Well, in the 7th month, the trumpet is blown on the 1st of the month. Then we have 10 days, right, till we get to Yom HaKippurim, the day of the atonements, right? The day of the atonements, judgment day. And then 5 days after that, right, we have the Feast of Ingathering, or the Pilgrim Feast, right, where we abide in huts, right, in tabernacles, in temporary structures made of, like, made of the boughs of trees and other goodly, vegetation, where we dwell in our huts to remind us of what the ancestors went through when Yahweh brought them through the wilderness, right, for 7 days, right? And that's the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. It's called Sukkot because that's plural. Sukkah is singular, right? So Sukkot, the thicket, the covert, the booth, a rude or temporary shelter, like a hut. Like, there we go, hut or lair, pavilion, tabernacle, tent, right? The Feast of Tabernacles that occurs in the 7th moon in the 7th month. Now, we went here because it was just necessary, right here. So we actually are looking at the end of the year. We just have begun right here, right? Pesach is still coming forward right here. Now, some interpret Psalm 81, as we mentioned, to connect with the harvest festival, tabernacles, that occurs in the 7th month. Many modern scholars, they kind of agree with that, usually because of the verse that we had shown you before, right? Now, others, they prefer to associate Psalm 81 with the Pesach, Passover, right? Because of the mention, right, of the Exodus, right? The mention of the Exodus, right? Here we go, right here in verse 5 in the KJV. Okay, here, let's bring it up. Verse 5. This he ordained in Joseph, a testimony, when he went out through the land of Mitzrayim, of the Tawid, the 2 lands, ancient Egypt. I heard a language I understood not. I heard a language I understood not. Now, that's where I was getting to right there, because here before us in the Hebrew, from the Hebrew here in the hard copy, he appointed it in Joseph for a testimony when he went forth against, right? So through the land, right? Or when he went forth against the land of Mitzrayim, the speech of one that I knew not did I hear, right? The speech, right? The speech of one that I knew not did I hear. This is one way of bringing out the translation here. KJV says, I heard language I understood not, right? So here we have Joseph, right? Joseph. Now, Joseph here, or Yosef here, right? Now, Joseph is spelled in like two different ways in the Hebrew. Here you see Joseph spelled in the full way. We say full way. Usually it's spelled what they call linguistically defective, or like a short form of the spelling. Here we have Yehoseph, Yehoseph. Often we say Yosef because that's how it's usually spelled. But fuller form of Joseph's name is Yehoseph, Yehoseph, right? Which means Yahweh has added. You remember the word, right? Asaph? Asaph is the second part of it. Asaph from Yasaph, Asaph, right? Asaph, to add, right? Or like to gather, to add, right? So here we get the fuller spelling of Joseph's name, right? And what's interesting right here, let's see if we got this right here. Is this here? Give me one moment. Let me look at the verse in the Ivrit. Yeah, it's because here Joseph's name is fully spelled, right? In Psalm 81 at verse 5 as Yehoseph, 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 Yehoseph for Yahweh, mine shall Yasaph. Yehoseph, Yahweh shall Asaph, Yahweh shall Yasaph. He shall add, right? He shall augment or has added, will add, has added, right? So here his name is spelled fully. Just a little note to those in getting into the study right here. So what does Joseph, Yehoseph, or Yosef represent? Here, it's not so much the northern kingdom. So Joseph is not so much the northern kingdom right here, right? As we have, right, in Psalm 80, right, round about verse 1, right? 80, round about verse 1. So when you look at Psalm 80, right, verse 1, give ear, O shepherd of Israel, right? Thou that leadest Yosef, right? Yosef, there spelled as Yosef, right? Here spelled as Yehoseph, right? Thou that leadest Yosef like a flock, thou that art enthroned upon the cherubim, shine forth, Hophiyah, right? So there it is related to the northern kingdom. But here in this psalm, Joseph is a synonym for Yisrael, a synonym for Yisrael. A testimony, the testimony was the celebration, the celebration. The testimony is like the feast, the festival, the appointment. This testifies to a historical fact and what Yahweh had did when he went forth, right? When he went forth to bring the 10th plague upon Mitzrayim. So here, this verse, as it's connected to this time and season, Exodus chapter 11, verse 4, right? Speech of one that I knew not, right? Or language, right? I understood not, right? The psalmist is thinking of himself as the spokesman for Yisrael, for the Beta Israel, at the time of the Yetziat, aka the Exodus. At that epic-making event, Yisrael, at the event, that event horizon, right? This is when Yisrael, right? Yahweh's son, right? I've called my son. When Yisrael, all as one man, began to Shema, when we began to Shema, hear Elohim. Such is the proper force of the tense in the original. So when we're studying the Hebrew, the original, this is the proper tense. When I began, right, to Shama, right? When I began to Shama, when Yisrael began to hear, began to listen, began to obey, right? Whom, right, he had not yet learned to know as the self-revealing Elohim, the self-revealing creator, the self-revealing almighty power, the self-revealing God of redemption. Thus to his name, right? And what he says of himself, Ehye, Asher Ehye, right? I am being that which I am becoming. I be who I be, right? Often translated simplistically in English as I am that I am. But the Hebrew sense is I am being, I become, I will be. The Ehye, Asher Ehye, right? That's the first person. Yahweh is the third person. He who be, who he be, right? The self-revealing Elohim of redemption, speaking to Yisrael, speaking to him, all as one man, one corporate entity, in the wondrous works, right, of deliverance from Mitzrayim, right? So the speech or the language here, Safa, Sefet, two ways of bringing out Safa, Sefet, BDB, bring it out as lip, language, speech, right? Literally it's Safa, right? Sefat, like lip, right? But that refers like to language or speech. Also the word Safa, Sefet can refer to like the shore, like the shoreline is like the lip of the land, the bank, the brink, the brim, the edge, the side, the border, the binding. But as far as the body, it's the lip, right? Secondarily, it's language. In a third way, safa is used for edge, shore. Yeah, we went to the lip of the river, right? Or the lip of the land. We went to the edge of the land. You know what I mean? Went to in that sense, right? The shore, the bank, right? Also, in a sense, safa can be used like for a cup, like a chalice, a cup. You know what I mean? You know, because like the lip of the cup, just to bring out the sense. It's through the idea of termination, right? Right. And so the Sefet is in the dual and plural. So one might say, well, why is it two ways? It shouldn't be two ways. No, you have to learn why it is two ways. Safa is singular. Sefet is like a dual plural, like to say like lips, the lips. But in this context right here, is speaking of the speech, right? The lesson that was impressed by Elohim, right? Yahweh Eloheinu, the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov upon Yisrael in his history. This occupies the remainder of the Mizmor, right? So although this psalm in the upper part here, blowing up the trumpet, remember we talked about the shofar, the ram's horn, because there's also the silver horn. So sometimes you just say trumpet. It could be referring to the Hatzara, right? The Hatzarot, the silver trumpets. Sometimes trumpet might be referring to the shofar, the ram's horn. This is referring to the ram's horn, right? And that's the verse that we touched on. And for this was a statute, or this was a hawk, right? The hawk, right? This was a statute, a prescription for Yisrael. And it was a mishpat. As you can see, often in the Torah, law is the source word is Torah, right? Like when we see the word law in English, but here the word law is actually not Torah, but mishpat. Mishpat. What is mishpat? Mishpat is judgment, right? Is a judgment, a deciding of a case, a judgment, right? It can be the litigation, but it also can be the sentence. It can also be the the execution, right? The execution, right? But generally speaking, it's like the verdict. Mishpat is a verdict, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. Yeah, man, they're about to call the mishpat. The mishpat is in? Yeah, man, let's go in and see what it is. What the verdict is, the mishpat, what the judgment is, right? What has been pronounced judicially, right? Especially a sentence, or a formal decree, right? Human, right? Or particularly in the Torah, divine law, right? So according to the Torah, his direction, instruction, what is the mishpat, right? What is the judgment, right? And a judgment of the Elohei Yaakov, of the Elohim, the God of Jacob. So now the rest of the psalm, as we just mentioned right here, the rest of the psalm, the evening psalm here is concerned, with the events, right, that happened to Yisrael, right, particularly, right, in Mitzrayim and coming out of Egypt. Now, what's so interesting is the latter part of it, right? Not going to hold you on this one right here, but there's a lot that's important here. But this psalm, it comes up, it's our evening psalm, right? Sometimes we just like to go into it a little bit more, especially when some of the themes, right? Some of the themes start to connect, with where we're at actually in the season. And since we're in the season right here, we just want to connect those themes. So it's a summons to observe the festival, right? Speaking of Elohim, the Creator's redemptive acts, right? Then also in verses 8 to 10 is the fundamental lesson. In fact, in verses 8 to 10, when we look at this right here, hear, O my people, and I will testify to thee, O Yisrael, if thou will shama, if you will hear, not just hear and listen, but if you will obey, if you will hear to obey, right? Are you here to obey? O Yisrael, if you will hearken to I, Now, here, this verse and these verses here, it pictures Yahweh speaking. Here we have the cardinal teaching, as we have in the Shema, right? Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, right? Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, right here. Then we get to verse 9, right here. The teaching of the second word of the commandment. So when we look at the 10 words of the commandments, falsely called, right, falsely translated as the 10 commandments, but the 10 words, right, we find the second word of the commandment, right? There shall no strange God be in thee, neither shalt thou worship any strange El. There shall be no strange El, right? No strange power in thee, neither shall you worship any strange. And notice the word strange, right? The two strangers here. You see the two strange there? But notice that the H word is not the same. This strange is Zor, right? To be a stranger, right? Like a foreigner, stranger, strange woman, strange, alienated, something turned aside, something profane, right? Also, the inner sense of it is like to commit adultery, right? And then over here, it says, neither shalt thou worship any strange, Nakar. Nakar is also another aspect of an alien, foreign God, like other people's God, Elohim Acharim, right? Elohim Acharim. It says, gods of other people. Thou shalt have no Elohim Acharim, no other gods. It doesn't say false gods. It says other people's gods, right? OPP. You should have no OPP gods, right? Before he who be who he be. So here we have a fundamental lesson here in Psalm 81, which is the evening psalm for the 5th day, right? The teaching of the second word of the commandment, right? The corollary of the great historical fact that's enshrined in the first command, the first word of the commandment. So Hebraically, Judaically, the first word of the commandment is actually Anoki, right? Anoki, Yahweh Eloheka. I am he who be who he be, thy Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. That's the first word. The first word of the commandment relates to consciousness, right? And then right here, just to touch on this right here, right? Just to show what's in the psalm that I was asked, why these psalms? So according Judaically, Hebraically, these are the evening psalms. And according to the Israelites of Ethiopia, these two have been preserved over thousands of years as the same evening psalms. It is said that these evening psalms, right, the evening psalms, the standing psalms, the evening psalms were the psalms that used to be chanted, right, in the temple of Jerusalem, up to 70 AD. So we get those two witnesses on the same evening psalms. So we ride up the chant right here, Psalm 81, verse 10, hear, hear, hear. Notice what we have here. Anoki, Yahweh Loheka, that there, right, that there is the first word, right, of the 10 words, the first word of the commandment. Anoki, I am, personal I am, right? I am Anoki, Yahweh, he who be who he be, Eloheka, right? Who brought thee up out of the land of Mitzrayim. Ha Ma'alka, who called you to Aliyah, Ma'alka, Me Eretz Mitzrayim. Open thy mouth wide. So here we have, notice this, in ancient Egypt, they had this thing called the opening of the mouth. And so the whole thing with the opening of the mouth is after someone passed away, right? At one time, it was reserved for like royalty and nobility. The whole Per Imheru, the so-called Book of the Dead, coming forth by day and by night. That whole rite and ritual was just for the rulers, right? The kings, the rulers, because they were like demigods, right? But later on, it got more democratized, and regular people started to partake in the same rite and ritual. So when somebody passes away, right, they would have things prepared for them, like a copy of the Per Imheru, the book of the coming forth by day and by night. Notice that phrase there. That phrase there is used throughout the Exodus and the Torah, where it talks about, and they went forth by day and by night. I just noticed a lot of similarities right there. I look at patterns, right? So here, when somebody passed away in ancient Egypt, they made a big thing about like funerals. It's interesting because I think nowadays this society is very much spiritual like Egypt. It makes a whole big thing, right? About those things, the amount of money and the ceremony and all of this and that. It's like a big event. It's like we see when we see what the grave robbers did in ancient Egypt, when they show us all the stuff people put there, and they find a lot of important stuff, but only in people's graves, which meant that it probably wasn't meant for us. But anyway, be that as it may, right? When somebody passed away, right, and now they get to the other side, there was this belief that they would go to the underworld. The Hebrews had a similar belief in Sheol, and the Greeks had a similar type of belief with some differences, in the whole Hades thing. So they would go to the Duat, the underworld. But when they get there, they would not be able to speak. They could not really speak. And therefore, they would get tormented by different spirit spooks and a lot of spooky stuff. You know what I mean? But they couldn't speak. They didn't have the power to speak. So the priests and their family on the living side would create a monument, a statue, and some stuff for them. And they would do some rites and rituals to this. And then the priests would pronounce different words and all this kind of stuff. And that would help them, utter a so-called spell or word or prayer or whatnot. And this would help their dead loved one, the one who had passed away, to be able to open their mouth. That's why they bury them a lot of time with the so-called Book of the Dead in Peru, right? Because then they'll be able to read and speak these words and get through all the trials and tribulation, right? To get to the throne of the one that they call their God, like Osar, and all of that, to the judgment hall, the Mishkanet. They can reach a judgment hall, and then they can be weighed. And then if they were proper, they would basically say they haven't done a bunch of things. Whether they did or not, they would just repeat the negative confession. See, the negative confession, right, is not the root of the 10 commandments. Why? Because we have positive and negative commands. So if a negative confession, where's the positive confession? See? And plus a confession is not a word of command. But anyway, be that as it may, confession's a testimony. But this is what they believe, their rites and rituals. Like Christians have their belief, but that they say at funerals and they do different things, so forth and so on. And be it as it may, this is not a critique, but a way of just bringing why I think this verse is important. Because they believe that if they got past all the trials and torments and everything else and said the right words, if they said the right words, then they will be able to go to like the Elysian fields, the Acheru. It was like, it's interesting. It's almost like the ancient Mitzrayim believed what the Hebrews believed, but the Hebrews and the Israelites believed that we will go to this land in the living. We will go to the promised land, the living, and that according to some of what has been discerned from ancient Mitzrayim belief, it was believed that one would go to it after they die. You know what I'm saying? So the opening of the mouth was for what they had to say, the spells they had to say, and the other words that if they said the right words, they would get over and they would go in, to this promised land, And in the promised land, they would have fields and farming. So this was a great religion, especially for the poor people later on, because they didn't have these things now. So for the Israelites, what Yahweh and Moshe, was saying to the Israelites was almost like saying, the pie in the sky is not after you die, right? Like thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth. It's about what we do right here, right? So when we found this verse which says, open thy mouth wide and I will fill it, it's just kind of interesting since it's connected with Mitzrayim, the Israelites coming out of Mitzrayim. So it is similar words, but it's used with a different intent, is what I'm pointing out. So when it says, open thy mouth wide, Elohim not only, right, rescued Israel, right, from the bondage, out of the house of bondage, and we was in bondage to other people, and we was in bondage to other people's gods. Often when we talk about the bondage of the Israelites in Egypt, it's like often, they were just working and doing a lot of working. Yes, that's true. But they also was in bondage, not just to working for people, but since the people and their God belief was so close, they were actually serving their gods, right, out of that work. Something to think about. Elohim not only rescued Israel from the bondage, right? See, when they say slavery, they're trying to get us on the psychological thing, right? But bondage is the word the scripture uses, right? From bondage, but provided their wants, what they lacked. He will continue to do so abundantly as long as the people are faithful to him. It is folly to go to strange gods, other gods, or the gods of other people, or the gods of strangers, right? You know what I mean? For the supply of needs. Like if you know you got your own parents, right, and your own family to go to, and they will help you because they have helped you. They shown you help. They just showed you help the other day ago, you know, and they say whenever you need any help, come to me. Now, wouldn't it be foolish to go to other people's family and ask for the same thing if you know that your own family does help you? I'm just saying for those who do have family that do help, right? Of course, right? When Elohim is able to give all, right, that every man can wish or desire. So this is an interesting verse. Open thy mouth wide. So the opening of the mouth, right, for the Israelites was something that we did here, right? While the opening of the mouth, right, you know, was something that for the Mitzrayim, to show the contrast between, okay, this is what the Hebrews admitted to be true or they believed, and this is what the Mitzrayim, just a kind of like a, you know, for lack of a better word, a comparative religion study, right? It's kind of interesting right there. You know what I mean? But last part of the psalm is speak about Yisrael's disloyalty, right? How they were disloyal in spite of all that, right? You know what I mean? However, my people would not hearken. They would not what? They would not shama, right? They would not hear, they would not listen, but more importantly, they would not obey. They would not be obedient to my voice. And Yisrael would none of me. That's what happened to the Israelites in the wilderness. It hasn't gotten to that point just yet, but definitely when we reach the fourth book, Numbers, Bamidbar, we're going to see it a whole lot, a whole heap. We do get it in Leviticus. You know what I mean? It begins to break out, right? But Yisrael would none of me, right? I mean, imagine that, would none of me. You know, I don't want none of him, right? But actually, Yisrael would not walk in my ways. That's the sense. Israel would not walk in my ways. Israel would none of me. Abba. Israel was not willing, did not consent, did not accept. So, right, I gave them up to their own heart's lust, right? I gave them up. What does James say? That every man is tempted, right? You know, like by his own, by his own desires, his own lusts. I mean, that's a powerful verse right there. Stop looking at others. Figure out what it is that's yours. You know what I mean? What is your own desires, your own lust, so you can be able to deal with it, right? So I gave them up to their own heart's lust. They walked, right, in their own counsels, right? To the hardness of their hearts, the idea of that, the hardness of their minds, to their own imagination, just their imagination that was running away with them in the wilderness. Then he says here, he says, oh, right? He says, oh, that my people, right, had hearkened, Shema, heard and obeyed, and Israel had walked in my ways. I would soon have subdued their enemies and turned my hand against the adversaries. Right now, here in this section right here, right, Elohim's appeal to Israel, right, and the context is the wilderness, coming out, the Exodus to the wilderness. The haters of Yahweh should have submitted themselves to him, right, but their time should have endured forever, right, should have yielded feigned obedience, right, should have yielded feigned obedience. That's what when it says submitted, should have yielded feigned obedience. Right? Should have submitted kahash. They should have, in a sense, they should have pretended. It would have been better for them. Right? You know what I mean? This is kind of an interesting sense right here. Right? But there's another reading of this, actually, that's a little more better according to the Hebrew. The other reading is that the haters of Yahweh should dwindle away before him. They should dwindle away before him. Right? And their punishment should endure forever. Their punishment should endure forever. Now, one of the little differences here in the Hebrew, when we look at the Hebrew, the haters of Yahweh, right? Their time, the time of humiliation and calamity, right? Israel's time, their national career would have gone on. It's speaking about Israel, getting a perspective of Israel from such a time to even such a time. Their time should have gone on. Right? And here's the last part. Remember after the molten calf, I mentioned there was a missed blessing. This is like saying the missed blessing, right? Hopefully we won't miss a baraka, I, Bashem Yeshua. He should have fed them also with the finest of wheat. and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied thee. The final verse, the fat, like with fat wheat. The finest of the wheat is the fatness of the wheat. Keep it fat, right? And he, Elohim, will feed him, right? Israel, right? Now, here, what do we have here? They should also be fed with fat of wheat and with honey out of the rock. Would I? That's the thing. If they were willing, right? He was willing, right? The richest ears of corn, right? The honey out of the rock, actually, that's taken from Deuteronomy, with this interesting connection right there. That whole idea of honey out of the rock, being familiar with the scriptures, it points us to Deuteronomy 32 and 12. Right, let's go there quickly. Deuteronomy 32 and 12. 32 and 12. Right. Let's see. Is numbering off 32, or did I misread? The Roman numerals? XXX. 13. 13. My bad. I misread. Right. He made him ride on the high places of the earth. So I guess the earth is not flat, huh? Right? Bama, on the high places. There's highs and lows, right? He made him ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields. And he made him to suck honey out of the rock and oil out of the flinty rock. So we get this right here, pointing to this right here. So anyway, brothers and sisters, I know I kind of segued on this right here. Just wanted to go into it because I just recalled as I heard the psalm, rise up to chant, that it's very much connected with the reason for the season here. Oh man, looking at the time right here, time just be moving, time. But here, once again, evening psalm. Yes, I.
Psalm 81.
מזמור פ"א למנצח על הגיתית לאסף.
Sing aloud unto God our strength.
עוזנו, הרנינו לאלוהים עוזנו.
Make a joyful noise unto the God of Jacob.
לאלוהי יעקב. הריעו לאלוהי יעקב.
Take a psalm and bring hither the timbrel, the pleasant harp with the psaltery. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the God of Jacob. This he ordained in Joseph for a testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not. I removed his shoulder from the burden. His hands were delivered from the pots. Thou calledst in trouble, and I delivered thee. I answered thee in the secret place of thunder. I proved thee at the waters of Meribah. Selah. Hear, O my people, and I will testify unto thee. O Israel, if thou wilt hearken unto me. There shall no strange god be in thee, neither shalt thou worship any strange god. I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Open thy mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people would not hearken to my voice, and Israel would none of me. So I gave them up unto their own heart's lust, and they walked in their own counsels. Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and Israel had walked in my ways. I should soon have subdued their enemies, and turned my hand against their adversaries. The haters of the Lord should have submitted themselves unto him. Their time should have endured forever. He should have fed them also with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock should I have satisfied, 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 I have satisfied. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
מזמור פ"א למנצח על הגיתית לאסף. הרנינו לאלוהים עוזנו, הריעו לאלוהי יעקב, שאו זמרה ותנו תוף, כינור נעים עם נבל. תקעו בחודש שופר, בכסה ליום חגנו, כי חוק לישראל הוא, משפט לאלוהי יעקב. עדות בהוסף שמו, בצאתו על ארץ מצרים, שפת לא ידעתי אשמע. הסירותי מסבל שכמו, כפיו מדוד תעבורנה. בצרה קראת ואכל לצקה, אענך בסתר רעם, אבחונך על מי מריבה סלע. שמע עמי ואעידה בך, ישראל אם תשמע לי, לא יהיה בך אל זר, ולא תשתחווה לאל נכר. אנוכי אדוני אלוהיך, המעלך מארץ מצרים, הרחב פיך ואמלאהו. ולא שמע עמי לקולי, וישראל לא אבה לי. ואשלחהו בשרירות ליבם, ילכו במועצותיהם. לו עמי שומע לי, ישראל בדרכי יהלכו, במעט אויביהם אכניע, ועל צריהם אשיב ידי. משנאי אדוני יכחשו לו, ויהי עיתם לעולם. ויאכילהו מחלב חיטה, ומצור דבש אשביעך.
And when they were come in, and when they were come in, and when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
Lion of Judah Society.
Yes. Look at that time. Look at that time right there. So here, with the fifth day's Aliyah, here in this reading and feeding. What's interesting about Leviticus, right? Even from ancient, even some modern Torah observant Yehudi also say this. They say that often they begin, right, with teaching the sons, teaching the youths with Leviticus. And they said the reason why they begin with Leviticus, people say, well, Leviticus has a lot of sacrifices. They say, well, because the children are pure. There's an interesting something about, how we look at Leviticus. We've been seeking to break down, some of the parts, going through some of the five different types of offering, and to look at it in the light of the Brit Chadasha, the light of the new covenant, as it says that the Old Testament, some have said, is the shadow and the new covenant is the substance. Well, we've been seeing to put that to the test, right? And it's very interesting. There's a lot of truth to that as well. But the first thing, to understand even the new covenant, right? One has to have a context, because there was a context to Yeshua, right? The Yehudi of the Yehudim, a Judean of the Judahites. Our Lord sprang, right, from the tribe of Judah, and the whole context, even Pesach, Passover, right? So here, the 5th day's reading, we're just gonna go through because of time right here, just kind of an overview right here, right? Right here, the 5th reading, 5th day here, Leviticus chapter 4, verses 1 to 26. So in the 5th reading, we have the Chata'at, right? The Chata'at. I don't know if you can see this here. Let's zoom in right there, right? What's known as the sin offering, the Chata'at. Chata'at or Chatat. Not Chatat, but Chatat, right? The Chatat. Now remember, we touched on Chata, looking at the word Chata, it means like to miss, like you miss the mark. You know what I mean? You fall short, you miss the mark. Basically, the idea of missing, right? Or lacking, missing, right? So sin in the Hebrew, African Shemitic sense has to do with the idea of missing, right? Like you miss the mark, fall short, miss the mark. And then also from that, like a forfeiture, like you can forfeit, you know what I mean? But in the 5th reading, we have the sin offerings, the Chatat. chatat, right? For unwitting sin. Notice it talks about unwitting sin, right? By the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, or the community. It required sacrificing a bull, right? Sprinkling its blood, not pouring, right? Not smearing, but sprinkle. You know, different between sprinkle and pouring and all that. Right? 'Cause I say that because sometimes when even certain ones who say they are Christian, this bloody thing, it'd be like, yo, the scripture don't speak about it like that. Just sprinkle. You know what I'm saying? Sprinkling its blood, right, in the tent of meeting, right? Burning on the mizbeach, on the altar. Oh, let me highlight this because I was just seeing a video where people was like, oh, they have altars to their ancestors and this and that. I would not advise that. I wouldn't advise that. But when we talk about the altar here, we're talking about the communal altar, right? And that's an interesting idea right here. Just a point to altar. Because I know other people, other gods, and other people that have other gods or strange gods or gods of others, you know what I mean? They no doubt, might have these altars. Some of you might have it as well. And not speaking anything personally, but just speaking principally, right? Right. So even this whole altar thing, right? The altar here is a communal altar, right? Let's see if we can do this right here. I was going to play the audible, but sometimes it's just good just to go through a little study, right? Where we can kind of zoom in, right? And look forward to the Shabbat time where we can hear the full, often not interrupted. But in the Shabbat, it's good for us to study, right? So let's go through this right here, just briefly, right? Because even when you hear the reading, we're basically going through the reading, bring out some of the Hebrew, but sometimes we don't have the time and opportunity to really zoom in, right? To zoom in, right? Study to really show ourselves approved. So here it says, speak to the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, in the direct Hebrew sense is sons of Israel, the sons of Israel. People say, well, why the sons, not the daughters? Well, to whom more is given, more is required. Understand that? Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a soul, right? If a nefesh, the nefesh, a psyche, nefesh, right? A soul. Once again, according to principle, soul has to do with the breath, the breathing creature, the soul, the psyche, and in the Hebrew, it's a noun feminine. Yes? If a soul shall sin, right? So if a man sins, it's because his nefesh has chata. Here's the word chata, right? Chatat, right? Sin offerings, chata, to sin, to miss the way, to go wrong, to incur guilt, right? To forfeit. Now, lastly, it says to purify from uncleanness. Now, each of these is based on how the word appears in various different areas, brings out that general sense, the spirit of the Hebrew. Those one word, it's not the letter of the law, but it's the spirit. So sometimes I would say, and I've said it before, some of the disciples, I don't say as much, but just to be not to put any stumbling block to the good news, right? But sometimes really to teach it rawly, like sometimes, we use the word up, right? With the F bombing at the beginning. So you know what I'm saying, right? You up, right? You know how people say, I don't give a uck. Okay. Sin was like uck, right? Sin was like that word with the F, fornication under the crown of the king, right? Bring out the acronymal sense of it, acronym, right? So if you uck up, you have to give a uck. But notice most people say they don't give a uck. So it's almost like when it says purify from uncleanness right here, right? If one has committed a chata, they had to give the offering that is called chatat. You see what I'm saying? So if they ucked up, they would have to give a uck. You know what I'm saying? They would have to give that offering, right? So if they miss, they would have to give an offering for the missing that would be called missing, right? I thought it was interesting, the whole give a uck. I don't give a uck. And people say, well, you should, you know what I mean? In that sense. So the purify from the uncleanness was to offer that offering that was the chata'at. That's what that purify sense means. But in the more basic sense of the word to miss, to sin, to uck up, right? To fornicate under the crown of the king, right? Get caught lacking, right? To miss the goal, right? To miss the goal, right? To miss the path of right and duty, Almost like like to swerve off the road. You know what I mean? If you swerve off the road, be safe out there, anybody driving and whatnot like that. You know what I mean? Especially, those even driving the big trucks. You know what I mean? You know what's going to happen, right? So think about that. In the way, the truth, and spirit and truth, it's the same basic idea. To incur guilt, and also with the khatat, incurring guilt, right? Incurring the penalty of guilt, and therefore forfeiting, right? To bear the loss, right? So now when you have ucked up and you have to give a uck, you have to bear a loss. You have to take, people say you have to take an L. You have to take an L. I don't know about taking an L, right? But we praise the L, right? You know what I mean? But I know what you mean, a loss, because the L, you're in a foreign language, right? But to bear the loss, right? To make a sin offering, the chata'at, right? And thereby, when you make that offering, right, you give a uck because you've ucked up. You know what I'm saying, right? That helps to purify from the uckery, from the sin, right? And purify from the uncleanness, right? So the sense of missing the mark, right? Right? Others cause others to miss the mark, or induce them to sin, or cause them to sin. And thereby, like I said, it's not always like what we do that's wrong. That's wrong, of course. But sometimes it's that guiltiness. You know what I'm saying? Like one might have done something, right? And had 5 minutes of pleasure, maybe, right? But then have a lifetime of guilt, right? Or condemnation, punishment. I'm just trying to bring out the ideas associated with this word, in the spirit of the word, right? Right? One can sin against himself. They can miss themselves, lose themselves, wander away, or they can purify from uncleanness. Now, this is an interesting sense. It's the heat pa'el of the verb. The heat pa'el of the verb is reflexive. So this means like the action is being done upon oneself. So you can miss yourself. You can lose yourself, right? In that case, you can wander from the way, or the same action for different contexts, you can purify yourself from uncleanness. Like sometimes people do wrong and then they get hardened in their heart. They get hardened in their mind. I don't care. Yeah, I know it's wrong, but I don't care. Now you need to lose yourself so you can save yourself. Whatever self that is of you, you need to lose yourself. Therefore, that's how you purify yourself from that uncleanness. You know what I'm saying? So just to bring out the sense of the word. So basically, miss, sin, lack, expiate, repent. You see the sense? I'm looking at the italicized words for the main words. To miss the mark, figuratively or generally, right? In the religious sense, to sin, right? By inference, what is inferred by that? You forfeit. What's inferred by missing and sinning and ucking up is you lack. You got caught lacking, right? And what must be done? You must expiate. You must repent, right? From that, right? To sin, to lead astray. You can cause somebody else to sin, right? In that sense. So here it says, if the soul, if the psyche, right? If the soul, right, shall sin, shall miss the mark, the soul, like your psyche, the psychological aspect, our mind, the soul, right? Our feeling, emotion, our breath, sin, right? Through ignorance. You see? So when it says unwitting means not knowing, through ignorance. Because it's an interesting reasoning. I'm not going to bring out the fullest sense. I'm still meditating on it, but I like to share this with others. Maybe, iron sharpen iron, right? One can help even I get a understanding of some of these areas right here, right? Fellow Talmudim, fellow disciples, says, if a soul shall sin through ignorance, right? You saw that? Through ignorance. So here's the question. Why does it say through ignorance? Ignorance is like, well, you just didn't know, right? Like I didn't know. Ignorance means like not knowing. Ignosis, right? Or here in the Hebrew, it's shagaga. You shagaga, right? Because shaga is like to like wander off, shaga, right? So shagaga is a more intensive form of that. BDB brings it out, sin, the sin of error, like you just didn't know, an error. The sin of inadvertence, right? Inadvertent sin, error. The general sense is like a mistake, right? A transgression unknowingly. So the same word is translated elsewhere in the KJV as error, right? Sin through error, sin through ignorance, not knowing, sin at unawares, you wasn't aware, or in the sense of unwittingly, to wit, like unwitting, you don't know, right? You didn't know, right? So the question is, well, it seems that sins that were done unwittingly, unknowingly, are forgivable. Right? No, I'm laughing here because one of my chaverim, when we read and Hilot Rasimah, sins that are forgivable. Blessed is one whose sins are forgivable. Right? Because, it's not saying that every type of sin in a sense may be forgivable based on just this verse here. Right? It says, if a soul shall sin through ignorance, at least in this context, if a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments, right? The commandments, mitzvot, right, of Yahuwah, right, concerning things that ought not to be done. Oh, I didn't know this was not to be done, right? Ought not to be done, and shall do against any of them, right? If a soul, first it just says a soul, right? And it says, if the priest that is anointed. So here it's speaking about if the priest that is Messiah, right? Mashiach. Look what it says. If the priest, that's why I keep emphasizing, he want to talk about all this fugazi stuff, right? Like they'll say, oh, Jesus is king. I know that's going to offend some people because they probably say, yeah, because that's how we've been taught, right? But wasn't that the whole charge? They lied on him. They were trying to get him killed, right? Isn't trying to kill an innocent man sin? If you trying to kill somebody who's a murderer and go around murdering, that's not a sin according to Yahweh, right? But if you kill somebody who they absolutely are innocent, isn't that a sin, right? And if that person dies because you try to kill them, right? Didn't they die because of your sin, right? Because you had this evil in you that you acted on, and now they are dead because you killed them, and killing them is a sin. You murdered them because you had intention to murder them, so they died because of your sin or for your sin. See, there's a whole context point that gets lost in the source, right? But here we have Mashiach, right? Moshiach, the anointed one. And so we say that the first Messiah, right, according to the scripture, as written in the word of Torah, first priest is Melchizedek, of course. But the first Messiah that we have is Aaron and his sons. So that's the first Christians in the camp, right? So it says, if the priest that is anointed do sin. So we can ask the question. So if there's a priest that's not anointed, well, according to the Hebrew way, that's not a priest. Right? If the priest that is anointed, but it's just kind of interesting the context here, because it says the priest Messiah. Hebrews speak of Yeshua, Hanotri, Jesus of Nazareth, as the high priest. You see that whole connection? And we are called to be a royal priesthood, according to the Brit Chadash sense. See, I think the context has been lost. If the priest, and it doesn't say like, well, some of you are called to be priests and some of you are not. It doesn't say that there. It says that he is our high priest. He's not ashamed of the brethren, right? Right? So if we all are priests, then that's not the big point right there, but it's the service that we serve. If the priest that is anointed do sin, so if the anointed priest do sin, right, according to the sin of the people, so if the priest that's anointed, instead of being like a leader for the people, he's doing like according to the sin of the people, right, then let him bring for his sin, right, that he have sinned, a young bullock without blemish, la Yahuwah, for a what? Remember we talked about the chatat. Here's that for the sin offering, right? And he shall bring the bullock to the door of the tabernacle, the bullock, right? The young bullock, the young steer, to the door, the patach, right? The opening, right, of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting before Yahweh, and shall lay his hands upon the bullock's head, and shall kill, or more correctly, shachat, shall slaught the bullock, lifnei Yahweh, before Yahweh, right? And the priest, notice, just to emphasize, it wasn't a fluke in writing, right? And again, it repeats. And the priest that is Mashiach. So here we have Mashiach, right? The anointed one, right? That means, in other words, the priest that's anointed, right, is basically the high priest. The other priests are anointed too, but this is mainly focusing on the high priest. But the other priests, all the priests had to be anointed, had to be christened, right? And the priest, that is Mashiach, shall take of the bullock's blood and bring it into the tabernacle, right? Right? Bring it into the tent, right? The blood is not, if you notice, the blood is not often brought into the tent, and there's really no sacrifice in the tent. I just want to point that out. There's no sacrifice in the Mishkan. It's in the outer court, outside. But the blood here is brought within. Some things are brought in to the tent of meeting. Then the priest shall do what? He shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of the blood 7 times. 7 times. 7 times. Why 7 times? Is it because of the 7 branches of the menorah? Is it because of the 7 seals in man? Right? The 7 seals in man, right there. So you see right there where the purple between the altar, right, and where the other 2 priests are. Yeah, I just want to show that right there. Anyway, before Yahweh, right, before the veil, right, of the sanctuary, right, before the veil of the Kodesh, before the paroket. The paroket is the curtain that separates the first room, the Kodesh, right, from the Kodesh HaKodashim, from the Holy of Holies. And it says, and the priest shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the altar of sweet aishans, right, upon the horns of the altar of sweet aishans, right, the incense altar that's in the tent before Yahweh. So here it's saying before, because before in the Hebrew means in the face of Yahweh. Why does it say that? Right? Is he there? Well, the glory did fill the glory did fill the tabernacle, right? And he said he would speak from above the mercy seat in between the 2 cherubim, the oracle, right? So that's a symbolic place. So when we talk about like ark worship and ark Christianity among the Israelites and the Christians of Ethiopia, that ark, the connection of the ark, that any church that did not have an ark in it was not considered to be like functional, right? It's like the tabernacle. The tabernacle didn't have the ark. Basically, it was symbolic he wasn't there, right? Check the importance of the ark here, right? So when it says before Yahweh, it's before the presence of the ark, directly, but more likely indirectly, right? So he's going to put it on the horns of the altar of sweet aishin, sweet incense before Yahweh, that is in the tabernacle, that's in the ohel, that's in the tent, right, of the congregation. And he shall pour the blood of the bullock at the bottom of the altar of the burnt offering. See, we have to pay attention. There's 2 altars. There's the brazen altar in the outer court, and there is the golden altar that's in the tent, right? So the priest will go in and, sprinkle the blood, put it on the horns, right? And he won't pour it inside, right, the tent. No, he goes outside to the outer court, right, where the brazen, I repeat, where the communal altar. It's not an ancestral altar. Is not to, even though Yahweh, he is the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we say the God of those ancestors, but the altar is a communal altar, right? The brazen altar, right? At the bottom of the altar of burnt offering. So just that distinction between the 2 altars, right? The golden, right? The altar of sweet aishans, the golden altar in the tent, and the one in the outer court, right, is where the blood is going to be poured, right? That is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, right? And then it goes into basically the butcher shop, right? The butcher shop. But it's important to also understand these elements because there's a pattern. There's a pattern here. And I think that, often we've missed something. So in the 5th reading, right, for the 5th day, right, this is kind of a summary overview, but to zoom in on certain things, right? In the 5th reading, the Hata'at, the sin offerings, they were for unwitting sin by the high priest or by the priest that was Moshiach, right? HaKohen HaMoshiach. Or the community, right? Then it further speaks to the community. Sacrificing a bull, sprinkling its blood, right, in the tent of meeting, burning on the altar the fat around the entrails, the kidney, and the protuberance of the liver, and burning the rest of the bull. Notice it says the rest of the bull was to be burnt on an ash heap where? Outside the camp, right? Outside the camp. Let's just go through this right here. So here it goes through that detail right there. We can go through that in more detail if necessary. The skin, right? Then it says, even the whole bullock shall he carry forth without the camp. There we go. To a clean place. Pay attention to detail, not to any place, but to a clean place where the ashes, the clean place where the ashes are poured out. So there's a place, all the ashes that must have been produced, there's a place where the ashes were poured out, right? And burn him, speaking about the bullock, on the wood, right? On the wood, on the eights. This word eights is also tree. The word wood is also the word for tree, right? Right? On the wood, right? With fire, right? Where the ashes on the tree with fire, on the wood with fire, where the ashes are poured out, shall he be burnt, right? Without the camp. Just a point to without the camp, right? At the pouring out of the ashes. Okay, so now here's just the second part of it right here. So it said for the high priest, right? Kohen Gadol, Kohen HaMoshiach, the priest that's anointed. And it says that if the whole congregation of Yisrael, the whole congregation, the whole Edah, the whole gathering, right, of Yisrael, if they sin through ignorance, notice that it's speaking about a shaga. Here's the word shaga, the root word of shagaga, right? Shaga. If they go astray, if they swerve, right? If they reel and roll, if they like get drunk, and they err, like it's like somebody drunk through intoxication, right? Or go astray in some morally speaking, right? Commit sin, uckery of ignorance, not knowing, inadvertence, right? Err, right? That's the sense right there, right? And the thing be hid. What? Nobody knows. The thing be hid. If it be hid, if it be alam, concealed, right? From the eyes of the who? The eyes of the kahal, the eyes of the assembly, the eyes of the church, right? The eyes of the members of the body, yeah? And they have done any, right, of the commandments of Yahweh that should not be done. They have done anything like, the commandments of Yahweh that should not be done, right? They are what? Here's the key word, asham. So now we have another offering, the 5 offerings, right? The sin offering, one of the 5, and then we have the asham. Asham, right? What is the asham? Asham is the guilt offering, right? The offense, right? The guilt offering, the trespass offering, the asham, right? Right? Asham, almost like a shame, right? Asham, to be guilty, right? To be punished, right? The guilt offering, right? So we have the guiltiness. When the sin, right, that they have sinned, right? So when the chatat, right, the sin that they have chata, when the lack that they have lacked, when the missing that they have missed, right, against it is known, when it's known, and the congregation, right, then the congregation, then who? Then the kahal, right, the church, right, speaking about not the building, but the members of the body, right? The kahal shall offer a young bullock, right, for the sin, and bring him before the tabernacle of the congregation, the tent of meeting. And what shall be done? And the elders of the congregation. So we talk a lot about the elders. Where are the elders at? The elders. And the elders, right, of the congregation shall lay their hands upon the head of the bull. So though the whole congregation did it, who does it put the responsibility on? The elders. It's almost like 2 children, the younger one, the older one. And the younger one said, but the older one said the younger one maybe made it done or did it. What does a good parents will say? But you are the older one. So the elders of the congregation lay their hands upon the head of the bullock, right, before Yahweh, right, in the face of Yahweh, and the bullock shall be shahat, shall be slaughtered, right, before Yahweh. And then it says, and the priest that is anointed, again, the 3rd time here, Mashiach, the priest that is the anointed one. Yeshua is the Moshiach, HaMoshiach. In what context? The context of the high priest. The whole book of Hebrews goes into that, right? Shall bring the bullock's blood, right, to the tabernacle of the congregation, right? And then it goes through, and shall dip the finger, shall dip his finger, right, in some of the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the veil, The veil is what separates the ark, right? What separates the ark in the Holy of Holies from the first room, right? The first room, the whole. There's two parts of the tent. The first, right, apartment from the second apartment. That's why it says, by a new and a living way that Moshe Yeshua has consecrated, right, for us through the veil, right? That is to say, his flesh, the veil, right? And he shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the altar that is lifting Yahweh, that is in the tent of meeting, tabernacle congregation, and shall pour out all the blood at the bottom of the altar of the burnt offering, right? That is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, right? And then it goes through that right there. And then likewise, carrying the bullock without the camp, outside the camp, right? Then it says, when a ruler, this is on the sin offerings, when a ruler, Leviticus chapter 4, when a ruler, what's the word in Hebrew? A nasi, a prince, nasi, right? When a nasi, right? One who's lifted up, a prince, a chief, a leader, right? Nasi. When a nasi, right? A president, even in later times, that word is used for president, nasi, right? But when a nasi, a ruler, a prince, have sinned and done through ignorance, right? Done through shagaga, right? Through error, right? Any of the commandments of Yahweh Elohayo, his Elohim, Elohav, that should not be done, and is asham, right? And is guilty. Or if his sin wherewith he hath sinned come to his knowledge. That means that one might do something, don't even know they did something. When it comes to his knowledge, right? When it comes to his yada, 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 right? When he gets to know, he shall bring his offering, right? Notice here, a kid of the goats, right? A kid of the goats, a male without blemish. What shall he do? And he shall lay his hands upon the head of the goat. It is said that the laying on of hands, when lay one's hands, almost like making, like with your two hands, right? You have that circle, or it would look like a triangle. I know people got this goofy stuff about Illuminati, New World or disorder, some garbage, but basically it would be like the hand sign of His Majesty, right? Similar to that, right? And then he would speak what he had done, right? Or what it was, because then he would have to slaughter it. What basically, kill it. Basically, the priest would give him the knife, the priest would hold the basin or the cup, right? And he would have to cut it from ear to ear, just to give people a full, right? So he lay his hand, right, upon the goat, right, and slaughter it, right, in the place where they slaughter, right, the burnt offering, right? Where do they slaughter the burnt offering? On the north side of the tabernacle. Pause that still right there. Yeah, that's still right there. If you could pause that still right there, because I just saw it right there. I don't know if you heard me. Yeah, if you could pause or bring that one back, bring it back one. Yeah, bring it back one more. There we go. You see over at the bottom, right, more to the right hand side, it appears like a priest, right, and someone who's on that, like on their knees, and the animal right there, right there. That's the side of the tabernacle. It's the north side where all the slaughtering went on. Bloody, right? But the north side of the tabernacle, that's what it's saying right here, right? In the place, where these, animals are slaughtered, right? But explain that earlier, right? Give thanks. Let it roll. So he shall lay his hands upon the head of the goat and kill it, right? Slaughter it in the place where they slaughter the burnt offering, the north side of the tabernacle, right? Before Yahweh, right? It is a chatat, right? It is a sin offering, right? And lastly but not leastly, right here, just bringing it up here, and the priest shall take off of the blood of the sin offering, put his finger, right, upon the horns. But now notice here. Here's the difference. Right? Because we rush past it, we'll miss some important detail. For when the priest does something, right, he has to enter into the tent, right? Now here, when a ruler or others, right, what does the priest do? The priest shall take the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it upon the horns of the altar of burnt offering, the brazen altar. It's almost like to say, like the feet of Christ, according to the Chazon Yochanan, and his feet as brass, as burnt in the furnace of fire, The brazen altar was made out of that brass, copper, brass, right? He shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it upon the horns. But upon the what? The horns, right? The horns of the brazen altar, right? And after doing that, shall pour, right, his blood, the blood of the animal, at the bottom of the altar of burnt offering, right? And then it says right here, and he shall burn all of his fat upon the altar as the fat of the sacrifice of peace offering. And the priest shall make a kapar, an atonement, right? A reconciliation for him as concerning his sin, right? And it shall be forgiven him, right? So the priest would basically pronounce, after everything was done to the offerer, right, that it has been forgiven you because they had fulfilled, what Yahweh had said to do, right? And then just this right here, because this is where we're at right here. This is the first reading here for the sixth aliyah, just to seal up right here. And it says, and if any one of the common people, so it's telling us about the priests, right? It's telling us about, like, a prince, you know what I mean? The chief big man, them, right? And now for the rank and file people. And if any one of the common people sin through ignorance. But notice with each of these sins, it's always through ignorance, right? It's just a concept that we lose sight of, you know what I mean? Because sometimes people do sin and they know what they're doing, right? But here, this is speaking about they're doing it through ignorance, right? While he doeth any of the commandments of Yahweh in that which ought not to be done, right? And be guilty, right? The people of the land, the common people, is the people of the land, rank and file people, right? The people of the land. Also notice, if you will, how Robenu, how Yeshua, how Moshiach, how he made a distinction, right? How he made a distinction between the priests, the Pharisees, the scribes, because they had access to the learning, the knowledge, and the regular people. To the regular people, he never said to them, don't you know what's written? It's written here, it's written there. No, he didn't do that with them. He taught them, and they received his teaching. But to the hypocrites, the Pharisees, those who should have known better, right, or the scholars of Torah, the bright ones, the ones that had the opportunity, to know the truth, right? It was different, right? So just notice that as well, how he related to the ones who, like, in the same order as we have here in Leviticus, right? Those who were in the position of the priest, the ruler, the ones who had access to the studies and the knowledge and should know better, right? And then here now it picks up for the 6 days aliyah, right, with the common people. And if any one of the common people or the people of the land, right, do sin, right, and then bring it down here, or if his sin which he have sinned come to his knowledge, this was the same as we had earlier, right, then he shall bring his offering, a kid. Now remember that to the big man them, they had to bring a kid, but it had to be a male, right? To the regular people, they brought a kid of the goats, a female, right, without blemish, right, for his sin that he have sinned. And then the same process, basically. So we see the same pattern, right? But the differences as it applies to someone in authority, right? And then also as it applies to rank and file, rank and file Israelites, right there. So here, last part, the guilt offerings, right, for unwitting. So we have the sin offerings and the guilt offerings here. So the guilt offerings, the asham offering for unwitting sin by a chieftain, by a chief, right, or prince, right, required sacrificing a male goat, putting some of its blood on the horns of the altar and burning its fat, right? And then as we go forward, there's a very interesting 6th aliyah, right? And the 6th aliyah coming up for the 6th day, Leviticus 4:27 to 5:10. So in the 6th reading, the guilt offerings, it continues in the asham. So we have there's 5 types of offerings mentioned here, right? 5 types of offerings, right? Here we're touching on the last 2, the sin offerings, chatat, and the asham. Here on the asham, right? The guilt or trespass. In the King James Version, sometimes the guilt offerings is referred to as the trespass offerings, right? For unwitting sin, right? Inadvertent sin, sins of ignorance by a lay person, a rank and file lay person, requiring sacrificing a female goat, right? In distinction to a chieftain, right? Bringing forward a male goat, right? Putting some of his blood on the horns of the altar, same process. Burning his fat, same process. The chatat, the sin offerings, right? Lastly but not leastly here, to understand when we talk about sin, repenting from our sins, right? Right? Sin offerings were required when a person, right? And for cases, right? This is a case study here. For cases when a person, right, was what? Was able to testify but did not give information. Somebody knew something that had gone on, but they held it. Maybe it was their friend or somebody, friend or family. They didn't want to say nothing, right? But that's a sin, right? That's a crime, right? Hebraically speaking. They was able to testify but did not give information, right? Or they had touched any unclean thing, right? Or they had touched some form of human uncleanness, right? Or they had uttered, right, an oath. They uttered something. They were going to do or not do something, right? And they had forgot about it, right? In such cases, the person had to do what? They had to confess, right? And sacrifice a female sheep or goat. Or if the person could not, say they could not afford, see that right there, the hand on the heads. You see what I'm saying right there? The hand on the heads. Or, right, if they could not afford, right, if they could not afford a sheep, 2 turtle doves, or 2 pigeons, right? That's what they would bring. So if they couldn't afford a sheep, right, and goat or whatnot, right? But what was it? Sheep. The sheep is the flock has sheep and goat in it, basically, right? Not just the flock is not only sheep, but sheep and goat, right? They would have to bring 2 turtle doves, right, or 2 pigeons, right? And the turtle dove is interesting. The turtle dove is the Yonah. Like we say Jonah, Yonah, right? Or 2 pigeons, right? So right there, they're very interesting. The cases that are called sin, because sometimes people talk about sin. What is sin? All right, sin is a violation of Torah, of law. So right here, brothers and sisters and brothers, just that overview right there. Just want to get into some of the details there, because once we get a good idea, then elsewhere where we find, elements of Torah, we can then understand. Oh, there we go. You see that right there? That's a horn. It's one of the horns. Symbolically right there, one of the horns of the altar. That's the brazen altar. In the background right there, that's the tabernacle, right? Just to get a context. See that we do all things according to the pattern. So right here, today's daily psalm. The cross in the Old Testament, right? The tau, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the tau. Here, Zakar. Remember. So here we have today's daily psalm. I'm going to go through this briefly right here, right? And then we have a kind of an overview. It's a very long psalm, has 72 verses, and due to the time, I'm not going to go through each verse, but give a good overview for the main sections, right? Here, this psalm is called Lesson, right? Lesson of the Beta Israel's history. So here we have Psalm 78, right? Psalm 78, according to the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews, after the order of Melchizedek, we have Psalm 78. We have Mizmor Ein Chet, Hebraically Mizmor Ein Chet, right? And here is also theme. Let's just bring this out here, right? The K and D is a warning and a mirror. So in Psalm 78, we have a lesson of the Beta Israel's history, right? And we also have a warning mirror, like a warning mirror. Now, what's interesting about Mizmor Ein Chet, today's daily psalm, Mizmor Ein Chet, a lesson of the Beta Israel's history, as well as what the K and D, Colin Leach note says here, it's a warning mirror. Remember the wise-hearted woman, they gave their Egyptian mirrors, the Mitzrayim mirrors, the Ankh-like mirrors, the brass mirrors. It's kind of interesting because the grave robbers and digging up of people's stuff, they have kind of brought some of those to light again. So we can kind of see, exactly what the Torah and the scripture is speaking about. So the psalm here is like a warning mirror. It's a warning, but it's a mirror. I mean, imagine you look in the mirror, you say this is the mirror, but suppose the mirror is actually a warning, right? So this is what the psalm is as we reflect on it, of the history, right, of the Israelite, the Beta Israel history, right, from Moshe, right, from Moses to David. And also, if we may add to this right here, according to the evidence in the scripture, we have the tabernacle of Moses, what we're studying in the Torah. And then we also have the tabernacle of David, when David brought the ark to Sion. When David brought the ark of the covenant, and he placed the ark of the covenant in a tent, right? In a tent, right? It seems as though he didn't bring the other elements, the other instruments of the tabernacle. He left that, I think, was that in Gibeah or Noph? I know it was at Shiloh, then at Gibeah, then at Nob, right? But he brought the ark now to Zion, right? So in the last verse of Psalm 77, Yisrael, Israel appears as a flock, right? Thou didst lead thy people like a flock by the hand of Moshe and Aharon, right? It says, Nachita katzon ameka. Nachita katzon ameka. You did lead your flock, you did lead your people, right? Your people, ameka katzon, as a flock. By the hand, beyad Moshe with Aharon. By the yad, by the hand of Moses and Aaron. In the last verse of today's daily psalm, Mizmor Ein Chet, right? Psalm 78, right? As a flock that is led by David. So we come to the last verse, verse 72. 72 nations bowed, right, to the anointed king upon the throne of great King David. In the last verse, it says, so he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart, and led them by the skillfulness of his hand, right? By the skillfulness of his hand. Wayar aim, Katom lebabo. Katom, by the integrity, the tom, the uprightness, right? Lebabo of his heart, and led them by the skillfulness of his hand. Uabita bunot, and be in tabunot. Tabunot, skillfulness. Tabunot is like understanding, by the overstanding. Ubia tabunota kapayo of his palms, right? Yanachem, he led them. So it's kind of interesting, the context here from Psalm 77, right? The prior to this psalm right here, it ends off in the last verse, right? Israel appearing as a flock led by Moshe and Aharon. And the last verse of today's daily psalm, right, where we have Yisrael, right, as a flock that is led by David, of a pure heart with judicious hands, right? So now Psalm 78 is considered a maskil, right? It's a psalm of Asaph. Both psalms also meet in their thoughts and expressions, 77 and here 78. Just as the Le Asaph for Asaph of both leads one to expect. So the Asaph psalms, the psalms of Asaph, they usually deal with a lot of historical, his psalms, his chants connect with like history, right? So Psalm 78 is called a maskil. A maskil is like a meditation. The word is also like appropriate here for the signification of a didactic poem. A didactic, one who is an autodidact, is like self-taught. Like a person that's an autodidact is self-taught. So a didactic, like a teaching poem, a teaching composition. For the history of Yisrael is recapitulated here, right, from the leading forth of and out of Mitzrayim through the time of the judges. So we have in today's song the history going out from Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, through the time of the Shoftim, of the judges, down to the time of David, even David HaMelech. And that with the practical application for the present age, even as an application for us, even in I times, that they and we should cleave faithfully to Yahweh, Elohei, Abraham, with Yitzhak, with Yaakov, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Hashem Yeshua, more faithfully more faithfully than the rebellious generations of the patriarchs. After the manner of the Psalms of Asaph, right? So we have Psalms that theme, Psalms of Asaph. The Ephraimites are made specially prominent out of the whole body of the people. Why are the Ephraimites singled out? Remember we talked about Ephraim and how that relates, like the northern tribes, the 10 tribes, and Israel in that sense right there. But the Ephraimites are made especially prominent out of the whole body of the people. Why? Because their disobedience. So the thing to note in today's daily psalm is the Ephraimites, right? That also points to like Israel, the 10 tribes, right? And their disobedience, as well as the rejection of Shiloh. Shiloh called Shiloh. Why did they say until Shiloh comes or until Shiloh? But Shiloh was a place where the tabernacle was, one of the spots that the tabernacle of Moshe from the wilderness when they got into the land, it was one of the places that the tabernacle was, but Yahweh had rejected that place. He rejected Shiloh. There's a rejection of Shiloh. And with the rejection of Shiloh, there was the election of David. By that, it was ever right at an end with the supremacy of Ephraim. So Ephraim, ruled for a while, the 10 tribes, the northern part, right? And also his brother tribe, Benjamin, also his brother, right? Ephraim and Benjamin and Benjamin. I noticed that Joseph, right? Joseph, he had the sons Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Jacob had adopted Joseph's 2 sons into the 12 tribes, right? Do the math, right? Right? Levi was separated, right, from the 12 tribes, not in that number, right? Joseph never really becomes a tribe in that sense, but his sons kind of replace him. So it goes from 12, right, plus 2, 14, down to 13. And then in the wilderness, Levi is separated, is not numbered with the 12 tribes. Levi serves, in other words, the 12 tribes in the holy place, right? So we have Ephraim, right, from Joseph, right? And then we have Benjamin, who is the brother of Joseph. What they all have in common is Rachel, the beloved wife of Jacob, right? So just to understand, one time the supremacy of Ephraim, the northern tribes, along with his brother tribe, Benjamin. It seemed like Benjamin kind of split half and half. Like some stayed with Judah and some kind of went with the northern tribes. You know what I'm saying? So the old Asaphic origin of the Psalms has been contested. So some people, though it reads Maskil le Asaph, a Maskil of Asaph, there's some who contest this. Why? Well, they said because in Psalm 78, round about verse 9, may be referred to the apostasy of Ephraim, where it says the children of Ephraim were as archers handling the bow that turned back in the day of battle. Right? I think in the KJV it says something about they were like kind of heavily armed. How does the KJV bring this out? Just highlights here. Not getting into all the verses, but some of the key highlights. The King James Version translates this says, the children of Ephraim being armed and carrying bows. They turned back in the day of battle. Wait, hold on for a moment. The children of Ephraim were strapped up. They had the strap. They were armed, strapped up. They were carrying bows. You know what I mean? We call them like long guns, sniper guns, because a bow would mean you could hit a person from far, like a sniper's weapon. You know what I mean? They had all of that. They were strapped, but they turned back in the day of battle. They turned back in the day of battle. Right here it says, B'nai Ephraim, Noshke, Romea Kashet, right? What it says right there, the descendants of Ephraim were sharpshooters, right, with the bow. B'nai Ephraim Noshkeya Romea Kashet, right? But the second part, Hafku, they were like overturned. Hafku, right? They turned about, like being overturned. Hafku, Biyom Karav, You know how we say Krav? Biyom Krav, like Krav Maga. Krav Maga is really street fighting, right? Karav, in the day of battle. Now the word Karav, one of the words for war, comes from Karab, which means to draw near, to approach, to draw near, right? That's why I point out Israeli street fighting. So in modern Hebrew, they'll say Karab as Krav, like Krav Maga, Krav, draw near, right? Krav Maga. Maga is like strike, juk, draw near and juk. Israeli street fighting. So here it says that the children of Ephraim, they were armed, they were carrying bows, they turned back in the day of battle. ISV actually kind of brings it out pretty good here, this verse. The descendants of Ephraim were sharpshooters in a modern sense, were sharpshooters with the bow, right? But they retreated in the day of battle. So here to our point right here, right? The apostasy of Ephraim and the other tribes. That's to say, to the division of the kingdom. Remember, it was a united kingdom under Saul somewhat, under David more so, under Solomon, but then afterward with Rehoboam, right? Rahov also means streets, right? In the streets, right? Rehoboam. Anyway, it got divided, right? The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. But this reference is, some say, capriciously imagined, right, to be read there. Because the psalm, some say, betrays a malice, some say. Indeed, a national hatred against Ephraim, such as is only explicable after the apostasy of the 10 tribes. So it's saying that this must be pointing to the time that the 10 tribes split from Judah, right? When the 10 tribes split from the monarchy of David, and they started to do their own thing, like many of the Hebrew Israelites split from the line of the tribe of Judah, and they do their own thing. But the alienation and jealousy, right, between Ephraim and Judah, the northern and southern kingdom, is actually older than the rupture of the kingdom. The northern tribes, in consequence of their position, that was more exposed to contact with the heathen world. This is why they were called the Samaritan, Shomeron, because it means like to guard, to watch, a watch outpost. So you could not attack Jerusalem until you first attacked the northern kingdom. So they were closer to like the Hittites and the Babylonians and the Iraqis and the other ones, being way up there in the north, right? And therefore connected to the Goyim, the other nations. They assumed a different character. So there's a different character among the 10 tribes. You could say safely here the Israelites, right? Or even in today's view, the Hebrew Israelites, right? And we, the black Jews of the line of the tribe of Judah, right? The tribe of Judah, right? A different character from that of Judah, living in patriarchal seclusion, right? So Judah was living further away, more in the south, while they were living more up north, right? They could boast of a more excited, a more martial history, one richer in exploit. In the time of the judges especially, there is scarcely any mention of Judah, right? In the time of the judges, right? So in other words, they're saying that Judah was like the country, down in the south. They were away from like the heathen world, while the northern 10 tribes, they were more in close contact, and much of the book of Judges has like northern tribe adventures, right? There's really a little mention, only at the end is there mention of Judah. Hence, Judah was little thought of by them, especially by powerful Ephraim. Ephraim was a big tribe, strong, big, enough people, right? That regarded itself as the foremost tribe of all the tribes, right? They big up themselves, right? From the beginning of Shaul's persecution of David, however, when the stricter principle of the south came first of all into decisive conflict for the mastery with the more lax principle of the Ephraimites. So the Ephraimites, got to be more lax, but after like the time of David, when David comes on the scene and that promise of Yahweh with David, then we get the stricter principle of the South. The South comes into focus, decisively. There was conflict over who's going to run this, because what happened, well, let's go on. Until the rebellion of Jeroboam against Solomon. Remember, Jeroboam was Solomon's enemy. Jeroboam was in Egypt. So we can see some Egyptianism, Kemetism, also infecting and afflicting the Israelites, the 10 tribes. Even though Judah was closer to Egypt, they were infected less with that because their leader, right, of Judah was David, right? And there was still that Davidic promise. But Jeroboam was Solomon's enemy. And the word says that Yahweh said that, when Solomon started to go off, right, that, he kept Jeroboam in Egypt, right, in Kemet and Mitzrayim, right, to give Solomon time to walk the way of David. But as it got to the point that he was walking less and less, right, towards the end, Jeroboam was brought out, right? Jeroboam was brought back. Yahweh said he brought him back. And then and Rehoboam, Solomon's son, the other son, right, they split the kingdom, basically. So there runs the history of Israel, a series of acts that reveal a deep rift between Judah and the other tribes. Right? I'm submitting to y'all today that this is the same even today. Right? It's not perceptible so much, but it is there. Right? Between those who say they are Hebrew Israelites, right, and deny, right, the Israelites of Ethiopia, and we, the black Jews, Beta Israel, the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, Haile Selassie, and all of that. We know that the first proclaimers, commandment keepers, they did not do that. They were firmly rooted and grounded. So there was a rift between Judah, right? And there's even a rift today among many of the Hebrew Israelites. You know what I mean? And simply put, it's because those Israelites there were able to maintain the throne of David over 2,000 to 3,000 years, right? And did not have to come under all of the afflictions that the other tribes did, right? And that's what I say, I submit to you, is the core of it, right? A rift between Yehuda and the other tribes, more especially Benjamin and Ephraim. Though, therefore, it were true that a hostile tone to Ephraim is expressed in the psalm. Now, it is true that when we look at the Bible as we have it, right, it's primarily through the hands of the tribe of Judah, right? And some say that it might be slanted in favor of Judah. But we go back to the patriarch. The patriarch Yaakov said, Judah, you are he whom your brethren shall praise, right? And they say that the brothers are going to like it. You know what I mean? So many of them, they disrespect the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, Haile Selassie, because they're violating the prophecy, right? And the consequences are here, and the consequences will follow. But therefore, it is true that there is a tone that's hostile to Ephraim. This is why we also make a distinction too. When we say Rastafari Jews and we the black Jews, and we say tribe of Judah, right? Because in the New Testament, it speaks about the Jews, the tribe of Judah. It doesn't really mention Israelites in that sense, though the tribe of Judah are Israelites. Many of the Hebrew Israelite camps, they confuse the matter. They muddle the matter, right? They confuse the matter. In fact, they even point that all the tribes are in the West. That is the confusion of the matter when the scripture says the four corners, the four winds, right? Some of the Hebrew Israelites are accepting that, okay, yes, we have some Israelites in Africa, right? But you can tell there's something, right? This would not be any evidence against its old Asaphic origin, since the psalmist rests upon facts, and what we're resting on is facts, and without basing the preference of Judah. There's not a preference to Judah because Judah is Judah. There's a preference to Judah because of the facts. And there's a preference to the line of the tribe of Judah and the Israelites of Ethiopia because of the facts, right? Well, what did they do for us? What kind of question is that, man? What did you do for Yah? Can we ask you that? Without basing the preference of Judah, of Yehuda, upon merit, right? He everywhere contemplates the sin of Ephraim without any Judean boasting. So notice in the psalm, it does bring out the northern 10 tribes, the Israelites, right? But it doesn't boast the Judahites. Oh, Judah was wonderful. No, right? Without any Judean boasting. In a connection with the sin of the whole nation. Because what happened to Israel, the 10 tribes, it affected the tribe of Judah. You know what I mean? It just so happened that the tribe of Judah is like the last of the Jedi, right? We see the tribe of Judah all the way to the New Testament times. Right? Where is the 10 tribes? Right? Well, they're here and there, right? And everywhere. In a connection with the sin of the whole nation that involves all of us in the responsibility. right? But we have to give credit to whom credit is due. Nor is Psalm 78, right? 78, today's daily psalm, just a little bit more here, y'all. Psalm 78:69, right? And he built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he have founded forever. Is this against Asaph? Asaph, did you know that Asaph was a contemporary of David? So, in another sense of this, we can see that Asaph, being a contemporary, he lived in the time of David. In fact, he was a Levite, and David, he set the order for the Levites, when the different tribes would be able to officiate. And that went on until the time of 70 AD, right? Because all that was still in Judah's responsibility. For Asaph may certainly have seen the building of the temple of Shlomo, of Solomon, and it towered upward to the skies, right? So some say that, well, when it talks about he built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he had founded forever, that speaks to, when Solomon built his temple. And since Asaph lived during the time of David, some would say that, well, he couldn't have seen that, could have happened at the time of Solomon. But we know that ones who were in the time of David, some of them lived past the time of David, right? So this is what it's saying right here in the note right here, has shown that even the divine name, Kedosh Yisrael, right? So the name here is the Holy One of Israel in the Hebrew, Kedosh Yisrael. It does not militate against him being the author. We have seen in connection, right, with Psalms like Psalm 76, how deeply imbued Yeshaya's language, the language you find in the prophet Isaiah, is with that of the Psalms of Asaph. So when you get a chance, look at which Psalms are themed Psalms of Asaph. Check out Isaiah and see if you can see a connection in the language, the style of verse and words and poetry and rhyme. It cannot surprise us of Asaph, right, is Isaiah, Yeshaya's predecessor, in the use of the name Kedosh Yisrael. There they spell Israel wrong. They say Israel, right? We have to check all who are of Israel. When we do say Israel, let's write it the proper way, not Israel, but Israel, right? The fact, however, that the writer of the psalm takes the words and colors of his narration from all 5 books of the Pentateuch or of the Torah. Notice something, with the exception of Leviticus, the book of sacrifice and the orders of the priestly realms, the Levitical order, is not opposed to our view of the origin of the Torah, but favorable to it. So when you look at the language and what Asaph is drawing on, it connects with the 5 books, all of them with the exception of Leviticus, right? So lastly but not leastly here, the author of the book of Job, with whom Psalm 78 at verse 64, just highlight verses, it says, their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. Chant. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows, like their wives, they didn't make no lamentation. It's like shrug their shoulder. Who are we speaking about here? We're speaking about Hophni and Phinehas, right? Great tune by A.K. Becker, Vaughn Benjamin, right? Who will go for us? He begins off talking about Hophni and Phinehas, right? They were corrupt priests. In 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 11. Their widows made no lamentation. This here is quoted in Job chapter 27, verse 15. The havoc that was wrought was so heavy and widespread that in the state of panic, some say, and anxiety, their widows had no thought to bewail their dead husbands, right? So here it says he verbally coincides. It's actually a quote, a reference to Job here in the 64th verse. Is regarded by us as younger, and the point of contact with other psalms inscribed by David and by the sons of Korah and by Asaph do not admit of being employed for ascertaining his time, like when he lived, since the poet is by no means an unindependent imitator. So for the Hebrews, like for us and our people, and in different forms of music, sometimes people, they bring back an older tune, or they get inspiration off a next tune. You know, so they're not unindependent imitators. They're imitating, right? But they're independent imitators of one another, not unindependent imitators, right? So right here, today's daily psalm, right here. We're gonna go over a little overview right here that we have pre-prepared for y'all right here, but we just wanted just to bring out a little bit of that. Here's like the opening verse right here to today's daily psalm, lesson of Yisrael's history, lesson of Israel's history right here. So a didactic psalm, teaching psalm. It brings home to the people a warning that was writ large in their annals. Right here, opening verse, maskil, right? A maskil, right? Of Asaph, a meditation of Asaph. Give ear, O my people, to my law, right? Here it has the word Torah, right? Torati, hazina ami. Torati, ha'azina, ami, Torati. Give ear, O my people, to my Torah. Ha'azina, ami, Torati. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. Hatua oznaim, oznekem, slika. Hatua oznekem. Le'imrei fi, incline your ears to the speech, right? The speech, the utterance, right? In the sense of words, the utterance, right, of my mouth. So a psalm for Asaph, le maskil, right? Maskil, right? To give instruction. First thing first, let's just get an ear of the whole of the psalm, right? Well, actually, let's break it down, and then at the end we'll play, right? Just a little bit less than a half right here. There it is.
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
Lion of Judah Society.
Whose spirit was not steadfast. It's so interesting because Maxie clearly says, for the nation of which he is the King of Kings, that the 10 words, the 10 commandments is very important. And still, you have some who claim the name who want to deny and turn their backs on it. So this psalm right here is just another lesson. The second section, verses 9 to 16. What happened in Egypt? Some say this is like a difficult verse here, verse 9, which some of the commentators explain by a tradition that's based on 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 21, that the Ephraimites did not wait for Elohim's, for Jah's act of redemption, but they left Mitzrayim on their own. Now there's a similar tradition concerning, some try to say, well, this is what happened to the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, if you've seen some of the documentaries about the Ark, so forth and so on. But the same tradition that the Ephraimites, who were the children of Joseph a Hebrew, and his Egyptian wife Asenat, right? Nate or Asenite, and they had, Ephraim, Manasseh. So the Ephraimites symbolize the northern kingdom. Northern kingdom come under Ephraim. Now it's interesting because Burhana Selassie, aka Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, and also his influence, Rastafari Joseph, even with the other nations, Israel in that sense, we'll get into that. But they explain that the Ephraimites did not wait for Jah's act of redemption, but left Mitzrayim, Egypt, on their own. Then they came into collision with the men of Gath. Remember Gath, Goliath, Gath, his brethren, family, and everything, who refused to sell them cattle. Suffering defeat, in the ensuing battle, or the battle, with heavy losses. It is probable that when Ephraim is here employed, it signifies the northern kingdom, or the 10 tribes, the 10 little Israelites, of which it was the leading tribe. We have Hosea, the prophet Hosea, chapter 4, verse 17. And although the denunciation, the put down here of the psalmist and I was true of the whole people of Israel, it is especially directed against the 10 tribes as a warning to the kingdom of Judah, of Yehudah, to the southern kingdom. Now we can apply this also today, to which he belonged. Now the tribe of Ephraim, as its history reveals, a big tribe though, right? 10 tribes compared to Judah and Benjamin and Simeon, assimilated in the Levites and everything. The tribe of Ephraim, as the history reveals, it lacks steadfastness. Therefore, its men are likened to warriors who run away in battle, although they're well armed. I mean, they're well armed, but they run away in battle. So this opens a second section here, verses 9 to 16. Just an overview right here of what happened in Mitzrayim. Chabarim. Sema. Hear this. Verses 9 to 16.
The children of Ephraim, being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle. They kept not the covenant of God, and refused to walk in his law, and forget his works and his wonders that he had showed them. Marvelous things did he in the sight of their fathers, in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea, and caused them to pass through, and he made the waters to stand as an heap. In the daytime also he led them with a cloud, and all the night with a light of fire. He clave the rocks in the wilderness, and gave them drink as out of the great depths. He brought streams also out of the rock, and caused waters to run down like rivers, down like rivers, down like rivers, down like rivers, down like rivers.
Down like rivers. So that's the second section right there. Now here we have verses 17 to 31. Just bite-sized, manahu, bite-sized manna, angel's bread. Israel's murmuring for food and drink. Verses 17 to 31. Because, the Israelite gotta eat. Right? Gotta eat, Yeah, they gotta eat, but they murmured. Sema, hear this. Verses 17 to 31.
And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust. Yea, they spake against God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Behold, he smote the rock that the waters gushed out and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people? Therefore the Lord heard this and was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation. Though he had commanded the clouds from above, and opened the doors of heaven, and had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven. Man did eat angels' food. He sent the meat to the full. He caused an east wind to blow in the heaven, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He rained flesh also upon them as dust, and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. And he let it fall in the midst of their camp, round about their habitations. So they did eat, and were well filled, for he gave them their own desire. They were not estranged from their lust. But while their meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them, and smote the fattest of them, and smote down the chosen men of Israel, the men of Israel, the men of Israel, the men of Israel.
But still, the lesson is not learned. Got some silly Israelites. But what has Jah done for us lately? Anyway.
Shema Yisrael.
Wow.
Adonai Elohenu, Adonai Echad.
But still, the lesson, your lesson, was not learned. And they missed the baraka, the blessing, the breath. Their life ended in nothingness. They failed to reach the goal of their wandering, which is the promised land. May I and I not fail by learning the lesson, right? Going through the testing and receiving the baraka, the blessing. So here brings us to verses 32 to 39. Still, the lesson was not learned.
For all this, they sinned still and believed not for his wondrous works. Therefore their days did he consume in vanity, and their years in trouble.
Again. Verse 32 to 39. For all what?
For all this, they sinned still and believed not for his wondrous works. Therefore their days did he consume in vanity, and their years in trouble. When he slew them, then they sought him. They returned and inquired early after God. And they remembered that God was their rock and the high God their Redeemer. Nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongue. For their heart was not right with him, neither were they steadfast in his covenant. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity and destroyed them not. Yea, many a time turned he his anger away, and did not stir up all his wrath, for he remembered that they were but flesh. A wind passeth away, again cometh, again cometh, again cometh. My advice is to fulfill the Ten Commandments. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel. Hear, O just gonna make you eat up lamb's bread. Shema Yisrael.
Recall the past mercies recalled. Verses 40 to 55. 40 to 55. The past mercies, loving kindnesses, recall. Now here, the same thought to introduce a fresh section as we had in verse 17, Habarim.
How oft did they provoke him in the wilderness and grieve him in the desert? Yea, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel. They remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. How he had wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Zoan, and had turned their rivers into blood, and their floods that they could not drink. He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. He gave also their increase unto the caterpillar, and their labor unto the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamore trees with frost. He gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to hot thunderbolts. He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, and indignation, and trouble, by sending evil angels among them. He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to the pestilence, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength in the tabernacles of Ham. But made his own people to go forth like sheep, and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. And he led them on safely, so that they feared not, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. He brought them to the border of his sanctuary, even to this mountain, which his right hand had purchased. He cast out the heathen also before them, and divided them in inheritance by line, and made the tribes of Israel to dwell in their tent, 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 to dwell in their tent.
Past mercies recall, verses 40 to 55. Now we have from verse 56 to 64, revolt, rebellion, and the punishment. The punishment continued.
Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God and kept not his testimonies, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful foe. They provoked him to anger with their high places and moved him to jealousy with their graven images. When God heard this, he was wroth and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent which he placed among men, and delivered his strength into captivity and his glory into the enemy's hand. He gave his people over also unto the sword, and was wroth on his inheritance. The fire consumed their young men, and their maidens were not given to marriage. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation, no lamentation, no lamentation, no lamentation, no lamentation.
Wayikat Kuyashin Adonai. Then Adonai awaked as one asleep, like a mighty man, Gibor, like a Gibor, Mita Ronem Miyayin, like a mighty man recovering from wine. He smote his adversaries backward. He put upon them a perpetual reproach. Moreover, he abhorred the tent of Yosef, of Joseph, and chose not the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Yehuda. Vayivhara et Shevet Yehuda, the Mount Zion, that he loved. Et Zion Asher Ahev. And he built his sanctuary like the heights, like the earth that he hath founded for Iva. This section right here, the choice of Zion for the temple, for the Heikal, for the holy place. Last section here, 3 verses, 70 to 72. The choice of David as king. He chose David, also his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds, from following the ewes, the female sheep that gave suck. He brought them to be shepherd over Yaakov, over Jacob, his people Amo, and Yisrael, his inheritance. So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart to college, and led them by the skillfulness of his hands. This fulfilling verse right here, really can zoom in on this verse right here. As far as the section, we would ride up with it in more detail, the 5 quotations that we played in the audio, recorded previously, but right here for this time and season as the psalm occurs during the pre-coronation time, and here in the pre-Passover season. We had Psalm 78 verse 2 in Matthew 13:35, I will open my mouth in a parable, in a parabolical, logical, in a proverb, a Hebrew mythos that so many stumble across and stumble over, the parables. I will utter dark sayings of old, the cryptic things Hebraically, that it might be fulfilled, which is spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things that have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. That's the first of the 5 verses in the New Testament. Then in verse 8, speaks about a stubborn generation, a stubborn or a crook-hearted generation. In Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, verse 40, says, save yourselves from this untoward generation. We have the Acts Apostles 2:40 bringing out today's daily Psalm 78 and 8. Then at verse 24, there's a comparison to Exodus chapter 16, verses 4 and 15. Then we have Psalm 78 at verse 31. The wrath of Elohim, wa'afa Elohim, Allah bahem. The wrath of Elohim came bahem upon them. We have a link in the New Testament with John 3:36, but the wrath of Elohim abideth on him. In Ephesians 5 and 6, for because of these things, cometh the wrath of Elohim upon the children of disobedience, of hard hearing. Colossians 3 and 6, for which things sake the wrath of Elohim cometh on the children of disobedience. And we have Psalm 78 verse 37. At verse 37, for their heart was not right with him. In Acts of the Apostles, we have 8:21. Acts of the Apostles chapter 8 verse 21. For thy heart is not right in the sight of Elohim. Then we have at verse 60. At verse 60 where it reads, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, called Shiloh of Shiloh, the tent he placed amongst them. We have in Revelation a comparison with Revelation 21 and 3. Behold, the tabernacle of Elohim with men, and he will dwell with them. The link with forsaking the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent that he placed amongst them. In the Septuagint, it reads, the translation from the Septuagint of this very verses, and he forsook the tent of Selom. In the Septuagint, instead of Shiloh, it says Selom, Shalem. His tabernacle where he dwelt among them, where he dwelt amongst them. So that right there, my brothers and sisters, just fulfilling today's daily psalm so we can ride up with the Sabbath, the Baraka for the Sabbath, more reasoning on it to come in the forwards. Yes, yes, yes.
Psalm 78. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter talk, sayings of old.
Go tell Jah an eternal day. And where you are go run to, yes, and the judgment day. Don't you all unite?
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.
Lion of Judah Society.
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room. 78. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he hath done. For he established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, and whose spirit was not steadfast with God. The children of Ephraim, being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle. They kept not the covenant of God, and refused to walk in his law, and forgat his works and his wonders that he had showed them. Marvelous things did he in the sight of their fathers, in the land of Egypt, in the field of Zoan. He divided the sea and caused them to pass through, and he made the waters to stand as an heap. In the daytime also he led them with a cloud, and all the night with a light of fire. He clave the rocks in the wilderness, and gave them drink as out of the great depths. He brought streams also out of the rock, and caused waters to run down like rivers. And they sinned yet more against him by provoking the Most High in the wilderness. And they tempted God in their heart by asking meat for their lust. Yea, they spake against God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Behold, he smote the rock that the waters gushed out and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide flesh for his people? Therefore the Lord heard this and was wroth. So a fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger also came up against Israel, because they believed not in God and trusted not in his salvation, though he had commanded the clouds from above, and opened the doors of heaven, and had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. He caused an east wind to blow in the heaven, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He rained flesh also upon them as dust, and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. And he let it fall in the midst of their camp, round about their habitations. So they did eat, and were well filled, for he gave them their own desire. They were not estranged from their lust. But while their meat was yet in their mouths, the wrath of God came upon them, and slew the fattest of them, and smote down the chosen men of Israel. For all this they sinned still, and believed not for his wondrous works. Therefore their days did he consume in vanity, and their years in trouble. When he slew them, then they sought him. They returned and inquired early after God. And they remembered that God was their rock, and the high God their Redeemer. Nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongues. For their heart was not right with him, neither were they steadfast in his covenant. But he, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity, and destroyed them not. Yea, many a time turned he his anger away, and did not stir up all his wrath, for he remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passeth away, and cometh not again. How oft did they provoke him in the wilderness, and grieve him in the desert? Yea, they turned back and tempted God, and limited the Holy One of Israel. They remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy, how he had wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Zoan. and had turned their rivers into blood, and their floods that they could not drink. He sent divers sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. He gave also their increase unto the caterpillar, and their labor unto the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamore trees with frost. He gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to hot thunderbolts. He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, and indignation, and trouble, by sending evil angels among them. He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their life over to the pestilence, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength in the tabernacles of Ham, but made his own people to go forth like sheep, and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. And he led them on safely, so that they feared not, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. And he brought them to the border of his sanctuary, even to this mountain, which his right hand had purchased. He cast out the heathen also before them, and divided them in inheritance by line, and made the tribes of Israel to dwell in their tents. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God, and kept not his testimonies, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow, for they provoked him to anger with their high places, and moved him to jealousy with their graven images. When God heard this, he was wroth, and greatly abhorred Israel, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent which he placed among men, and delivered his strength into captivity, and his glory into the enemy's hand. He gave his people over also unto the sword, and was wroth with his inhabitants. The fire consumed their young men, and their maidens were not given to marriage. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows made no lamentation. Then the Lord awaked as one out of sleep, and like a mighty man that shouteth by reason of wine. And he smote his enemies in the hinder parts. He put them to a perpetual reproach. Moreover, he refused the tabernacle of Joseph, and chose not the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Judah, the Mount Zion, which he loved. And he built his sanctuary like high palaces, like the earth which he hath established forever. He chose David also his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. From following the ewes great with young, he brought him to feed Jacob his people, and Israel his inheritance. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart, and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands.
Yes. Lala Tov, Boker Tov. Good night, good morning, good rise. The Shabua Tov right here, coming to the seal.
For his foundation is in all the mountain. Lord God loved the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. Glorious things are spoken of the old city of God, Selah. I must make mention of Rehoboam Babylon, and to them that know I hold for this the entire with Ethiopia, this man was born there. Christ himself shall establish her, as well as the singers, and the players upon instruments shall be there. All my springs are there. The Lord God Jarasafari Haile Selassie the first shall come, when he writeth of the people that this man was born there. In the society of the rich and the poor and the law, in the society of the rich and the poor and the law, man I heal the I-90, the I-Lake of Jah, heal the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Heal the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. We are in the society of the rich and the poor and the law. Man, I heal the I-90, the I-Lake of Jah. Heal the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And when they were come in, they went up into an upper room. They went up into an upper room.